Chapter 1157. This ability can actually digest the giant demon cannon. Dean's face was full of shock. With the help of his X-ray vision, he could see more clearly than anyone else. When the giant demon god cannon rushed into the darkness released by Crimson Moon, it was entangled by the black energy that pervaded the darkness. As the giant demon god cannon moved forward, the dark energy quickly penetrated inside and decomposed it. Finally, the giant demon god cannon, which was riddled with holes, collided with a mass of energy that condensed in the darkness. With a loud bang, it broke apart and did not cause the slightest bit of damage to Crimson Moon. From Lin Chongqing's memory, the giant demon cannon was a super powerful laser weapon that could penetrate a Genesis god mecha. According to the Federation's speculation, it was enough to kill a king. Moreover, with the speed of the giant demon cannon, ordinary kings wouldn't be able to react. In history, there were at least 5 kings who died under the giant demon cannon, but the situation in front of them completely overturned the previous record. The giant demon cannon that could threaten a king was ineffective in front of Crimson Moon. What else could the Federation use to resist? A group of Genesis god mecha? Or a super large yield nuclear bomb? Hydrogen bomb? At the same time, in the Federation's command center, many generals were looking forward when they saw the giant demon cannon dissipate. But Crimson Moon was still floating in the air. There was absolute silence. Everyone's eyes widened in shock. Then their faces turned ashen and their bodies trembled slightly. What kind of monster is this? Someone trembled. She's the new king of the demons? Her ability can actually block the giant demon cannon? What kind of ability is this? Everyone was in a panic, but soon a loud voice resounded. Immediately mobilize all the giant demon cannons. Aim at this female demon king and shoot her to death. Hearing this, everyone seemed to have found their backbone. They immediately calmed down and went back to their duties to command the battlefield. At this time, the situation on the battlefield changed dramatically. The darkness spread and quickly covered the edge of the battlefield, as if to surround the entire sky. Behind the darkness, the Bloodthorn Monarch's arms turned into blood vines. After taking root in the ground, they seemed to absorb the nutrients of the earth and quickly multiplied and split. The blood vines were like earth dragons that penetrated the ground. Mecha below 4 stars were instantly pierced by these blood vines, as if they were fragile pieces of paper. A forest of blood vines gradually formed on the ground, covering an increasingly large area. Just the appearance of these 2 monarchs had brought an overwhelming advantage to the battlefield. Dean had never thought that the power of a single person could play to such a terrifying extent in the war of millions of soldiers. The remaining 2 monarchs haven't even appeared yet, but the situation has already turned in their favor. I wonder what will happen if all 7 monarchs of the Empire arrive. But in that case, the Federation will launch nuclear weapons. Dean thought. At this time, Dean discovered that in the area shrouded in darkness, many of the mecha that were fiercely fighting with the Magic Mark's warriors had malfunctioned. Some of them suddenly became sluggish, and some of them suddenly crashed into their companions in a straight line while flying. It seemed that they were completely out of control. Dean used his X-ray vision and found that most of the mecha systems were being interfered with by a special magnetic field. The 4-star Athena mecha that was fighting with the Abyss didn't have any problem. Yes, why didn't I think of it? Dean's eyes lit up. The Federation relied on the power of science and technology. Lin Chongqing didn't have a body, and his consciousness had infiltrated into the virtual host. Therefore, the Federation didn't implement the Magic Mark's warriors on a large scale in the Federation. Instead, they used the power of science and technology to fight against the monsters and the Empire. The reason for this was that Lin Chongqing could control the entire Federation, and the Federation would have to rely on his puppet consortium, Terrace. Once the Federation became a society like the Empire, the Magic Mark's warriors would be the main fighting force, and the dependence on science and technology would be reduced. Lin Chongqing's sense of existence would be weak, and he could even be replaced, enslaved, and eliminated. However, Lin Changsheng was able to rule the Federation because of the reliance on science and technology. But if there was no technology, no mechanical legion, no electricity, and no other energy sources, then the Federation would enter a primitive society. Lin Changsheng wouldn't be a threat then. If there is a way to stop the energy supply of the host city, or to use a magnetic field to interfere with the signal of the mechanical legion, then it would be tantamount to cutting off Lin Changsheng's hands and feet. Dean's eyes lit up. At this time, there was another change on the battlefield. The Federation launched a lot of technological weapons, and more than a dozen giant magic cannons were fired at the same time, bombarding the Black Curtain. However, the effect was not great. After tearing a few holes in the Black Curtain, it didn't take long for the Black Curtain to sew back together again. With the Federation's technology and detection instruments, they couldn't find the exact position of Crimson Moon. What they were aiming at was Crimson Moon's avatar condensed from the dark energy in the Black Curtain. Only Dean could barely sense the position of Crimson Moon's real body through his X-ray vision. It was hidden in the depths of the Black Curtain. In this Black Curtain, Crimson Moon could condense an avatar at will, and she could hide anywhere. It was like a domain that she controlled. Under the leadership of the two kings, the Magic Mark's warriors on the ground charged forward, forcing the Mechanical Legion to retreat step by step. There was a large number of casualties. When the Black Curtain appeared in the sky, a large number of fighters crashed, and the remaining fighters had to fly back to the apron at the back of the battlefield. The Thunderbird in the air seemed to be extremely afraid of the Black Curtain. Without waiting for the fighters to retreat, it took the initiative to fly away from the Black Curtain, seemingly rushing to a higher position. Even the Thunderbirds were afraid of Crimson Moon's ability. Although the electric power released by the joint attack of the Thunderbirds was enough to kill the kings, these Thunderbirds were not humans after all. When they encountered something that they were instinctively afraid of, they would only stay away. It seems that Lin Changsheng doesn't intend to use the Mechanical Legion. The giant magic cannon has failed. Next, he will probably use the real war weapons here. I don't know if they can resist it. Dean's eyes flashed. Through Lin Changsheng's memory, he knew the cards of this line of defense like the back of his hand. As he expected, it didn't take long for a large number of the Mechanical Legion to retreat. The Magic Mark's warriors took advantage of the victory to pursue and attack. When they were 7 or 8 miles away from the command center, an underground base behind the line of defense slowly opened. From inside, a mechanical platform was pushed out. On top of it was a huge cannon barrel. It was more than 20 meters long, like a cannon, but the base was connected to the mechanical platform below. Near the platform was a vast plain on which there were a large number of windmill generators, sunlight generators, and hydroelectric generators. In one of the underground bases, there were also 2 nuclear reactors buried to supply energy. Super Raytheon Cannon. Dean's eyes narrowed as he looked at the huge black cannon barrel. Chapter 1158. Boom! When the Super Raytheon Cannon appeared in Dean's eyes, a dark purple light appeared in the muzzle. In the area more than 10 meters away from the muzzle, the air was slightly distorted. Electric currents flashed like a storm magnetic field. In the center of this magnetic field, there was a clear straight line. There were no electric sparks flashing in the air, like an invisible, transparent pipe. The next moment, the flashing electric light in the air suddenly condensed and shrank to the straight line without electric sparks, in a straight line with the muzzle. Boom! It was as if a thunderbolt had exploded on the ground. The violent sound was deafening even from more than 10 miles away. Dean felt a burst of numbness on his skin, as if a weak point had been touched. His hair seemed to slightly curl up, as if it had been split open by the static electricity. A purple light beam pierced through the sky, leaving a mark on his retina. The next moment, the black curtain that permeated the entire battlefield was suddenly torn, drawing a purple crack, like a black painting being cut open. Even with Dean's eyesight, he couldn't capture what happened at this moment. Without any foreshadowing, without any pause, the Super Raytheon Cannon gathered energy and fired at a speed beyond Dean's imagination. Perhaps when it was pushed out, it had already finished storing energy. After being startled for a moment, Dean quickly reacted and looked at the battlefield. The black curtain was torn, and the blood-thorn forest behind the black curtain was also penetrated. The blood-thorn king, who had long been hiding in the depths of the blood-thorn forest, had unexpectedly disappeared. The next moment, Dean saw that the blood-thorn forest that was constantly expanding its territory, all the vines stopped moving. Then they twitched, softened on the ground, and quickly split, dissolving into bright red blood. In an instant, a sea of blood appeared on the battlefield, soaking and submerging the rest of the broken limbs. Even some broken mecha were covered by the sea of blood, dyeing the surface of the mecha blood red. Dean's golden pupils slightly shrank. He quickly searched the battlefield, but couldn't find the figure of the blood-thorn king. Dead. Dean sucked in a breath of cold air, his face full of shock. The blood-thorn king, who could almost control the situation of the war, had died just like that. It was simply terrifying. Suddenly, he thought of Crimson Moon in the sky. He hurriedly looked up and saw that the torn black curtain was gradually wriggling, as if it was slowly recovering. In a corner of the black curtain, there was an extremely dark figure. From the silhouette of the figure, it was Crimson Moon. She didn't seem to be injured. That shot should have been aimed at her. She and the Bloodthorn King should have been in a straight line. With the destructive power of the Super Raytheon cannon, it should have been enough to kill two birds with one stone. But she didn't manage to dodge it. It seems that the target wasn't her real body, but a dark energy clone. Dean's eyes were dignified. Crimson Moon didn't have enough time to react due to the speed of the shot and the fast charging time. It was obvious that the target of the Super Raytheon cannon was wrong. If he wanted to fire a second shot, it would take at least 30 seconds. The previous shot had depleted 1/10 of the electricity on the battlefield. Although 1/10 did not sound like much, this was the central battlefield of the Federation, supplying the charging and operation of countless mecha systems. 1/10 of electricity was already extremely terrifying. When she spreads out her domain, it will be very difficult to kill her. The hidden figure that I saw might not be her real body. It might also be her doppelganger, whose purpose is to confuse the higher detection instruments. Perhaps her real body has already merged with the darkness, and there is no difference at all. Dean looked at the black curtain in the sky. He had to say that Crimson Moon's ability was too troublesome to deal with. Perhaps he would have to go berserk with his son Beast and completely dissolve her domain when the sun was at its strongest. But he didn't know if this was her last card. While Dean was thinking, a beam of light suddenly crossed the sky from the battlefield of the Empire. It was like a particle beam, extremely fast, far exceeding the speed of sound. It flew in an arc toward the position of the Super Raytheon cannon. The King of Light. Dean saw that there was a human-shaped light particle cluster in the beam of light. He immediately thought of the identity of the other king. At the same time, the black screen in the sky also changed. A huge pupil suddenly condensed in the black screen. The pupil was incomparably red, like the eyes of a demon beast, but also like a blood-red sun that was not dazzling, overlooking the entire world. Dean was in a trance when the pupils appeared. There was a feeling of dizziness. The next moment, he saw a familiar figure appear in front of him. She was smiling sweetly towards him. It was Aisha. Dean's body trembled the moment he saw her. He was so excited that every cell in his body was jumping. Even if he faintly felt that it was an illusion, he didn't want to think about it. He even wanted this moment to continue. Even if it was fake, it was worth it if he could see her. However, Aisha, who was smiling sweetly, suddenly changed. Her whole body emitted a black smoke-like atmosphere, as if she was possessed. As the black smoke spread out, the smile on her face was covered. Her expression unconsciously became cruel, cold, and even her whole face changed. Under the transformation of the black smoke, she became an incomparably ferocious undead. Her hair was flying in the air. Instead of saying that she was an undead, it was better to say that she was a peerless corpse emperor. That kind of monstrous aura was not something that an ordinary corpse king could imitate. Dean was about to step forward, but suddenly stopped. He was startled for a moment. The next moment, his fingers slowly clenched into a fist. King of Demon Eye. A strong, murderous aura exuded from Dean's body. His pupils had turned golden, and there were two flames burning outside the golden pupils. The flames were close to his skin, but they didn't burn him, because he could control the heat of the flames, but the heat of the flames on the outside air would burn and distort it. Golden cracks appeared all over his body, and golden flames appeared on the cracks. In the sky, the blood-red giant, I suddenly turned slightly. There was a bit of doubt in his eyes as he scanned the battlefield. Just a moment ago, he suddenly felt a strong, killing intent aimed at him. This kind of killing intent made him feel a chill in his heart. It seemed to be extremely threatening, but only other kings could threaten him, or at least the strength of the king level. Could it be that the Troll Federation had cultivated a king? Thinking of this, his heart turned cold, and his eyes became cold. Even if it was a king cultivated by the Federation, so what? In front of them, who had experienced hundreds of battles, they were not opponents at all. Chapter 1159. Bang! Dean was startled by a loud noise. He turned his head and saw that the metal platform where the Super Raytheon cannon was located had collapsed. The special alloy barrel that guided the lightning was cut off. The cut surface was sharp and neat. In the air in front of the platform, there was a figure in a white robe that looked like a priest. He was wearing a golden lace hood. His back was straight like a sharp sword. Dean's pupils shrank. His eyes flashed for a moment. The overflowing murderous intent in his heart gradually converged. He calmed down. He knew that it was not the time to settle accounts with them. After destroying the Super Raytheon cannon, thousands of soldiers and horses suddenly rushed out of the darkness in the sky. They were either ferocious or burly figures. Some looked like human knights, some looked like ferocious mobs, and some were huge monsters. All of them were made of black fog. They rushed out of the darkness, stepped on the sky, and killed the Mecha Legion on the ground. This scene was like an epic and extremely shocking. Some unmanned, intelligent mecha on the ground were not affected by the giant bloody eye. When the Black Fog Legion rushed over, they took the initiative to meet the attack. They raised their hands and shot a large number of armor-piercing bullets, dummy bullets, and other highly lethal bullets. The flames were like orange flowers blooming on the ground. However, when the fiery rain-like bullets swept past the figures of the Black Fog Army, they directly passed through them, leaving ripple-like glimmers on their bodies, bringing with them wisps of black fog. The Black Fog Army pounced on the mecha and instantly turned into a cloud of black fog that wrapped around the mecha. The black fog scattered in all directions and wrapped around the mecha like ropes. These unmanned, intelligent mecha quickly froze on the spot. The joints of their bodies and the joints of the alloy emitted black fog. When the black fog gradually floated out of their bodies, it was as if their lives were being sucked out. The mecha all fell to the ground. Is the King of Demon Eyes good at illusions? Dean looked at the motionless mecha warriors on the battlefield. Then he used his X-ray vision to look at the command center. The heat source figures inside were also standing in the same place. They did not move. It seemed that they were all under the illusion. He frowned slightly. The King of Demon Eyes illusions were indeed terrifying. Hypnosis on such a large-scale battlefield was enough to wipe out 1,000,000 lions. However, the Federation had already responded. Buzz! The sound of an ancient horn suddenly resounded throughout the battlefield. It came from all directions, as if the mountains were calling out to it. It was extremely loud and clear. Dudian felt that his mind was a lot clearer and his thoughts were a few times more agile. He knew from Lin Chongsheng's memory that this was the barbarian god that Lin Chongsheng had developed to break illusions. This strange sound wave would stimulate the cerebral cortex and refresh the mind. It would break most of the illusions. With the coverage of hypnosis used by the King of Demon Eyes, it wasn't surprising that the barbarian god was broken. Just as he had expected, the mecha warriors who were in a deadlock on the battlefield woke up one after another when they heard the sound of the horn. This included the generals in the command center. Very quickly, the battle began once again. However, In the short 10 seconds when they were caught in the illusion, the situation on the battlefield had already become overwhelmingly tilted in their favor. Those magic marks warriors did not stay idle. They quickly attacked and killed, and the mecha warriors suffered heavy losses. After regaining consciousness, the mecha warriors retreated under the command of the command center, abandoning most of the defensive line and retreating to the last line of defense in front of the command center. The first line of defense is going to fall. Dudian saw the situation and knew that it was only a matter of time before this place was breached. The trump cards of the first line of defense had been used, and it was no longer able to stop the four kings. He immediately sneaked away and retreated far away. The battle cries seemed to be following him. As he retreated, the cries also whistled over. The tide of magic marks warriors submerged the earth. Countless mecha were destroyed in the torrent. The defensive line was routed bit by bit. Dudian saw that many combat-armed fighters took off from the apron behind the command center. They carried some generals and colonels with medals on their shoulders and withdrew from the battlefield. Next is the peace circle. Dudian slightly narrowed his eyes, turned around, and quickly rushed to the peace circle. 3 hours later, in the forest of the peace circle, a team of more than a dozen mecha ran all the way in panic. The team of mecha looked a bit embarrassed. More than half of the mecha were injured. Some of the mechanical arms were torn off and electric sparks were shooting out. Some of the mecha were full of claw marks and the alloy was torn. Some of the mecha had some kind of animal-like claws hanging on their hooks. They were stuck in the chain of the hook and couldn't get rid of it. The team of mecha fled all the way to the peace circle and came to the beautiful green forest. They were just about to stop to rest and reorganize themselves when suddenly a black shadow shot out from the forest. This black shadow went straight to one of the mecha and instantly penetrated it. The pilot inside the mecha died and turned into meat paste. The black shadow didn't stop and continued to pounce on the next mecha. The other mecha operators came to their senses and panicked, shouting enemy attack. Then, in a short span of 20 seconds, all the mechas fell to the ground. In the empty space, 3 mecha operators were lying on the ground in panic, looking at the black shadow approaching them step by step. With their many years of experience in border defense, they could tell at a glance that this monster-like black shadow was a demon warrior. Because of its pale face that had a metallic luster, it still had a bit of a human silhouette. A few minutes later, Dudian killed the 3. From their mouths, he learned that the first line of defense had been lost. The demons were reorganizing themselves and preparing to attack the Federation. Finally, it's coming. Dudian thought for a moment and turned to leave the place. After the defense of the peace circle was activated, staying in the peace circle was very likely to be annihilated. He had to find a way to sneak into the Federation. After going through Lin Chongqing's memory, Dudian quickly found a way. His figure disappeared into the forest. The smell of blood permeated the forest, and the little monsters that lived in the forest became restless. Smelling the stench, they picked up the corpses of the dead pilots on the ground and gnawed on their heads, arms, and bones, making crunching sounds. Less than half an hour after the group of monsters had their meal, the surface of the lake by the edge of the forest suddenly shook slightly, forming ripples. Soon after, the entire earth trembled slightly, and many of the monsters that had been resting after eating stood up from the ground, looking warily into the distance. Then, as if sensing something, the monsters let out a cry of anguish, turned around, and sprinted in the direction of the Federation, abandoning their forest lair. After they left, the shaking of the ground became louder and louder. Yellow sand and dark clouds appeared in the sky like a gloomy storm. At the moment, the 12 cities of the Federation's border defense were filled with killing intent. The lords of the 12 cities gathered in the virtual network and sat on the 12 golden chairs. All of them looked gloomy. The first line of defense of the Federation was broken. This kind of thing had happened before, but it was very rare. Every time it happened, there would be an earth-shattering and tragic war. It was the time when the demons invaded. After each war, the vitality of the Federation would be greatly damaged. It would take more than 10 years to recuperate. According to the BattleNet, they have already stepped into the peace circle. One of the city lords said gloomily with his hands crossed on the table and his fingers covering his chin. Another city lord said in a deep voice, "Since we're here, let's bury all these damned beasts." The situation is not optimistic from the information of the first line of defense. Although one of the 4 kings of the demon race have been eliminated by the super Raytheon cannon, but the remaining 3 are not simple characters. One is the Demon Eye King, who is good at hypnosis. One is the King of Light, and the last one is the new king of the demon race. I don't know the specific ability of her, but she can release black energy to block the line of sight. She can use the black energy to attack and penetrate the armor. The effective mecha is very weak. Perhaps the only way to deal with her is to send out the Magic Beast Legion or the Undead Legion. I suggest that we activate the defense system of the Peace Circle. Moreover, we should apply to the President to use the MT2 hydrogen bomb and strive to catch them all. No matter what kind of king they are, they all have to die. I second the motion. Chapter 1160. At 14:39 in the afternoon, outside the 100 cities of the Federation, in the vast and boundless peace circle, a majestic army swept over like a torrent of steel. It was the Imperial Border Guards who were fully armed. They were dressed as knights and rode on war horses bred by the Imperial demonic beasts. In the sky behind the army, a large number of fighter jets and steam-powered airships flew in the sky like locusts, pushing all kinds of federal military weapons seized from the first line of defense. Naturally, there were a large number of captives who had already obeyed the Empire and activated the weapons for the Empire. Although the Empire mainly developed genetic power, its level of technology was not low. Its research on biological genes was hundreds of years more advanced than the Federation's, and its other aspects of technology were close to the level of the Third Industrial Revolution of the old era. In the middle of the army, a large number of generals accompanied 4 stalwart figures. These 4 people were vaguely led by a slender and graceful woman, and the 3 behind her were also extraordinary. However, standing on the far left was a young man wearing a blood-red robe and silver-riveted gloves. His face was pale, like a vampire in an ancient castle. His eyes were sunken, and he gave off a somewhat sickly feeling. If Dean was here, he would recognize that this was the Bloodthorn Emperor who had been penetrated and destroyed by the Super Raytheon cannon. The main army has entered the peace circle of the Troll Federation. Half a step behind Crimson Moon was the Light King, dressed in a white robe like a priest. As he spoke, his eyes swept over the back of the beautiful figure in front of him. His gaze could even see the fine hair on the back of her neck, and a trace of light flashed in his eyes. Crimson Moon looked ahead with a thoughtful expression. After a moment, she said, "The Demon Emperor said that the Federation's peace circle is buried with a large number of traps. It is the second line of defense of the Troll Federation, and also the most terrifying line of defense. Although no one will come out to stop us after we enter the peace circle, it will be convenient for the Troll Federation to activate their world-destroying weapons and wipe us out in one fell swoop. I think we can split into 2 groups. A young man on the far right with a devilishly handsome face and 2 long and narrow dark golden eyes on his cheekbone suggested. His voice was neither a man nor a woman, but it seemed to have a strange charm. Split into 2 groups. On the other side, the Bloodthorn Sovereign King frowned, his pale face slightly gloomy. I attracted the firepower earlier and was heavily injured by that thing. I need to recuperate for the time being. Don't expect me to appear again." The bewitching youth glanced at him. Thinking back to that destructive lightning, his eyes flashed with a trace of coldness. He knew that if it was him, he would definitely die if he was struck by that thing. However, the Bloodthorn Sovereign King managed to survive. It could be seen that the Bloodthorn Sovereign King's survival ability was much stronger than his. No need to separate. Crimson Moon opened her mouth, her voice indifferent and filled with unquestionable majesty. The enemy has more than one world-destroying weapon. If we split up, we will only suffer a greater blow. If we stay together, we can still resist together. The key is that this place called the Peace Circle is not peaceful at all. Most of the traps inside are not a threat to us, but there is a weapon that can hurt us. The gazes of the three king tiers froze as they looked at her in astonishment. For her to think so, it was most likely true. When they thought of the abilities this Queen of Darkness was proficient in, their expressions became even more serious. The scientific name of this weapon is rather long. It's called the Life Extermination Ring. Once it's activated, all living things in this area will be exterminated. No matter how high or low one's physique is, it will be difficult to resist. Crimson Moon said slowly. She had found this information from the heads of the highest commanders of the first line of defense. No matter how high or low one's physique is, the Bloodthorn Sovereign King's expression changed slightly. Isn't that even more powerful than their world-destroying weapon? Can't we resist it? Crimson Moon shook her head and said, the attack of this thing isn't physical. It can only be resisted by the strength of one's body. Instead, it directly acts on the magnetic field of one's life. You can think of it as a soul weapon. It can directly attack your soul and scatter it. Even if you can split your body, you won't be able to resist it. In terms of lethality, it is indeed more powerful than the world-destroying weapon. The three king tiers looked at each other. They didn't expect the Troll Federation to have such a terrifying thing. So you're saying that we have to return empty-handed? The Demon Eye King frowned and glanced at Crimson Moon. He felt that since she was so calm, she must have some other ideas. The Light King, who was standing behind Crimson Moon, had a smile on his face like a benevolent priest. However, his eyes swept across the sky in the distance. A glimmer of light flashed in his eyes, but he didn't say anything. Return empty-handed? Crimson Moon seemed to have heard a joke. She sneered and said, why would I give up halfway? Although this ring of life extinguishing is terrifying, its range is limited. The fact that it is called a ring has already exposed its flaw. Since it is a ring, it is one-sided. We can pass through it from the sky or from underground. There are many ways. The Demon Eye King was startled. He patted his head and laughed bitterly. Although he looked like a teenager, his actions and expression made him seem somewhat mature. The Bloodthorn Sovereign's furrowed brows relaxed. With a cold expression, he said, I'm afraid it will be risky to have all the troops sneak in from the sky or underground. I have two suggestions. The first is to use the Abyss as the leader and split up the army. We will use guerrilla warfare to flank the enemy from all directions. The enemy's world-destroying weapons will basically be ineffective. The traps on the ground can also be blocked by the Abyss. Then we can sneak in from the sky. The second method is to have the main army continue to advance. We will bring a group of elites and sneak in from the sky. Let the main army move slowly. When the enemy's attention is on the main army, we will have already sneaked into the Troll Federation. Even if the enemy uses world-destroying weapons to attack the main army, it won't matter. As long as we win in the end, these Troll Federation's lowly citizens can all be used as soldiers. The Demon Eye King nodded. I think so too. The Light King smiled as if he didn't hear it. He didn't agree or deny it. Crimson Moon already had an idea. She said, let the main army continue to advance. Then, split a few groups of Abyss soldiers to lead the smaller groups to flank and attract the enemy's attention. The rest will follow me and sneak in from the sky. The Bloodthorn Monarch asked, why not underground? Every city in the Troll Federation has world-destroying weapons buried under the ground. They have the most advanced sensing systems. Once they detect us, they will activate the world-destroying weapons and sacrifice a city. It will be enough to bury us all. Crimson Moon said coldly. The Bloodthorn Monarch's pupils shrank slightly. He didn't say anything else. Soon, the plan was given and executed immediately. A moment later, Crimson Moon and the other three kings led a group of Abyss Masters and Abyss Elites into the sky and disappeared. Outside of the Federation's Copper Ship City, a group of mecha operators who had escaped from the first defense line rushed over. Hundreds of mechas landed on the carrier's giant receiving platform. A group of mecha operators got off in a hurry and quickly retreated to the city passage. Majin, why aren't you running? I sprained my ankle. You go first, I'll be right there. Another person was about to help him, but suddenly there was a tremor at the end of the plane outside the receiving platform. Mecha operators' vision and hearing were much sharper than ordinary people's. They could vaguely see the sky turning dark. The man's expression changed. He immediately turned around and ran without looking back, rushing into the city passage with the crowd. Majin, who stayed where he was, turned around and looked. His eyes flashed, and he rushed to a corner of the receiving platform while no one was paying attention. Although this place was outside the city's protective shield, it was not within the range of the ring of life and elimination. He glanced at the Imperial main army coming from the end of the plane and narrowed his eyes slightly. He didn't expect them to directly rush into the peace circle. Chapter 1161. There are protective shields and detection systems over the 100 cities of the Federation. Their traces will soon be discovered. But compared to the Ring of Life, this energy shield is nothing. Dean turned his head and looked at the rear of Bronze Ship City. It was the hinterland of the Federation. He should have expected such a situation. With his wisdom and computing ability, what kind of trap will he arrange to receive them? He was looking forward to it. He wouldn't intervene in the war between the Empire and the Federation. Lin Changsheng and Crimson Moon's death would be a great revenge for him. If Crimson Moon and the others appeared in the main city of the Federation and went deep into the hinterland of the Federation, it would show that the attack was not a bluff. The Empire wouldn't dare to risk the lives of the 4 kings. Once Crimson Moon and the other 3 kings died, the strength of the Empire would be greatly weakened. It would arouse the covetous eyes of the Federation and the Fire Dragon country. Therefore, the 2 sides would fight to the end. Dean would make a move even if all 4 kings were killed. He believed that the Demon Emperor wouldn't let such a situation happen. Maybe it wasn't just the 4 kings who came. The Demon Emperor might also appear on the battlefield, but no one noticed him. More than 10 minutes later, the Imperial Legion entered the depths of the Peace Circle. At the same time, in the Warhammer Citadel of Bronze Ship City and the other 12 frontier cities, several loud noises burst out. Intercontinental missile-like lights and shadows flew out, dragging long trails of air. Near the peace circle that the Imperial Legion entered, the ground burst open. The continuous explosions formed a huge mushroom cloud that completely engulfed the Imperial Legion. At the moment of the explosion, an invisible shockwave shook out from the ground outside a border city along the route of the Imperial Army, like a wave sweeping across the plains. The green grass swayed like a breeze, but wherever this breeze passed, the bodies of the poisonous snakes, stone scorpions, and other small monsters hidden in the grass all stiffened and stopped moving. Even some of the wandering corpses also became sluggish, but only for a moment before continuing to wander. The traps of the Circle of Peace, the attacks of the 12 border cities, and the Ring of Life and Death hidden in the depths of the Circle of Peace were activated at the same time. These concentrated attacks were enough to wipe out a large beast tide in an instant. However, in an inconspicuous city behind the 12 border cities, a giant cannon suddenly ejected from it and shot into the place where the Imperial Army was attacked, landing in the dust. Boom! The next moment, the entire sky seemed to light up slightly. Immediately after, a deafening roar rang out, spreading across more than half of the Federation. Not long after, a mushroom cloud that looked like a volcanic eruption appeared and rapidly spread in all directions. The air was also quickly swept away, and a scorching heat wave swept through the surroundings like a storm. If an ordinary person were to stare at this place, just the scorching light from the explosion would be enough to blind them. The mayor of the 12 border cities, who was also the Minister of Defense of the Federation, looked at the sight of the explosion nervously, waiting for the feedback data and filtered images from the detection system. Tens of thousands of meters up in the sky, invisible to the naked eye, a group of figures appeared. A violent sound rang out from the ground, causing everyone's pupils to shrink slightly. Even though they knew about the Troll Demon Federation's world-destroying weapon, they had never seen it before. At this moment, just hearing this earth-shattering sound caused their hearts to palpitate. If they were in the center of this sound, even Fei Yu and the others were not confident that they could survive. This is the world-destroying weapon that destroyed the old era. Fei Yu's eyes flickered slightly. There was some fear in them, but there was more of a strange light in them. The Bloodthorn Sovereign's pale face became even paler. This sound seemed to have awakened the fear that was sealed in the depths of his memory, giving him an impulse to turn around and escape. At the same time, a series of earth-shattering and terrifying images appeared in his mind. It was not just a world-destroying weapon, but many, all over the world. The Radiant King and Demon Eye King's expressions were not good. The most terrifying thing in the depths of their memory had been evoked. While they were afraid, they could not help but have a strong killing intent towards the huge Federation below them. It was a thought that they must destroy it. Get ready, kill. After Fei Yu came back to her senses, a cold light flashed in her eyes. With a low shout, she took the lead and dived down. Her body flickered, like a phantom shuttling between reality and illusion, appearing and disappearing. It was difficult to catch. The rest of the people followed her and dived down. Like a sharp cone, their target was one of the cities. Looking from the sky, the layout of the 100 cities of the Federation was very obvious. There were 12 border cities on the periphery. Inside the border cities were ordinary cities. Inside were the 4 main cities. And in the center of the 4 main cities was the main city of the Federation, which was also the place where the Federation president and members of parliament lived. The explosion was not only the signal of the destruction of the Imperial Army, but also the bugle call for Fei Yu and others to start the war. Dean saw that the Imperial Army was swept away by the nuclear bomb and the Ring of Annihilation, so he no longer paid attention to it. He restored his original appearance and soared into the sky. He flew out of the energy shield of Copper Ship City and went straight to the direction of the main city of the Federation. Soon, Dean saw a heat source emerging in the sky. These heat sources were extremely shocking, and there were a lot of them. There were 40 to 50 of them, and the lowest one was an abyssal-level heat source. Sure enough, they are attacking the main city of the Federation. Dean slightly narrowed his eyes. It seemed that Fei Yu did not know about the existence of Lin Changsheng, which meant that the Demon Emperor did not tell her about this. Otherwise, she would not have taken the risk to go deep into the hinterland and attack a puppet like the Federation president. Thinking of this, his heart suddenly shivered. If he was the Demon Emperor, what would he do at this moment? The host city. Dean suddenly realized that the Demon Emperor had already sneaked into the Federation and was squatting in the host city. Let Fei Yu attack the main city of the Federation to attract the attention of the Federation. After the Federation president and members of parliament were killed, the 4 consortiums would split up. At this time, in order to avoid losses, Lin Changsheng had to stand up to preside over the overall situation and expose himself. Perhaps he would use the second puppet, which was the Terrace Consortium. The Demon Emperor wants Fei Yu to force him out so that he can send the mechanical army to deal with Fei Yu, and then wait for the opportunity to sneak into the host city and destroy Lin Changsheng. Thinking of this speculation, Dean's face became a little strange. He had to say that from the perspective of the Demon Emperor, this method was good, and it was likely to make Lin Changsheng suffer a setback. However, the Demon Emperor did not know of his existence. But Lin Changsheng would not forget him. The more chaotic the situation was, the more vigilant he would be, and he would always be on guard against Lin Changsheng's attack on the host city. If he thinks that the Demon Emperor is me, then the Demon Emperor will be bloody unlucky, Dean muttered to himself. Suddenly, he thought of another thing. If Lin Changsheng did not know that the Demon Emperor had sneaked into the Federation and was wholeheartedly dealing with Dean, then he would inevitably set up a trap to lure Dean to attack. At this time, the first to lose control would be the Demon Emperor who was waiting in the dark, and he would become Dean's scapegoat and fall into Lin Changsheng's trap. It was no wonder that the Demon Emperor was not cautious enough. only that he did not understand the situation. Chapter 1162. At this moment, Crimson Moon and the other three kings descended from the sky with many abyssals. In less than 4 or 5 seconds, they appeared in the sky above the federal main city like meteorites. Their momentum was terrifying and immediately attracted the attention of the federal main city. The city defense department was in chaos. Countless people were like ants on a hot pan as loud alarms sounded on the skyscrapers and streets of the city. Everyone who was working, leisurely drinking tea, or shopping was shocked by the sound of the alarms. This kind of city defense alarm would be performed once a year. Each time it was performed, it would be announced in the news in advance with a set date. However, this time, it was outside of the set date without any warning. All the citizens were stunned for a few seconds before they suddenly panicked and rushed toward the emergency entrances in the buildings into the underground tunnels. These tunnels and escape methods have been seen countless times in the show. Even a 7- or 8-year-old child knew this. The time was too short. Crimson Moon and the others appeared in the sky above the federal main city like ghosts. Without giving the city defense department time to react, they crashed into the electric grid energy shield of the federal main city. With Crimson Moon in the lead, they tore a huge hole in the energy shield. Crimson Moon's body was filled with electricity, repelling the electricity on the energy shield and creating a gap. The others quickly passed through the gap. After entering the energy shield, the huge federal main city was under everyone's feet. Dozens of abyssals and 4 kings looked down at the city with a style that was completely different from the Empire. The next moment, they swooped down like death gods. Crimson Moon and the other 3 kings went straight to the federal government in the center of the city. The rest of the abyssals flew toward the Congress and other places. Some even pounced on some tall buildings. With a casual blow, they shook the steel-like buildings to the point of collapse. The federal main city was shrouded in wailing. The abyssals destroyed and slaughtered everywhere in the city. Some news agencies had just captured the buildings being destroyed by the abyssals, and the cameras and a few brave reporters were crushed into meat paste. All of this was broadcast to other cities. Countless people were frightened. They didn't expect the abyssals to be so cruel. Some children and women were so scared that they started crying. At this time, the city defense department mobilized the creator god mechs and a few other types of 5-star mechs. Some of them were auxiliary mechs that were responsible for stabilizing the city. They were not good at fighting, but they were very good at cleaning up the battlefield. There were also mechs that were responsible for transportation, sending some refugees to the shelter. Wherever the abyss swept through, it was a complete mess. Crimson Moon and the other kings charged into the government. Crimson Moon quickly found the president of the Federation after reading his memories. They captured him and searched through his memories. Only then did they realize that the president of the Federation was just a puppet. The real manipulator behind him was the person in charge of the Terrace Financial Group, Jasalodi. After learning this information, Crimson Moon's face darkened. However, she did not kill the puppet chairman in a fit of rage. Instead, she used the Federation government's news platform to broadcast this scene live to every city in the Federation. She also used the highest authority to take over all other information platforms. At this moment, all the citizens of the Federation, even those young men and women who did not care about the survival of the Federation and only knew how to have fun, saw this scene from their favorite entertainment devices. No matter how they tried, they could not turn off this scene. They could only watch this boring scene with indignation. In front of the camera, Crimson Moon and the 3 kings stood with cold expressions. They were tall and straight, their temperaments cold and arrogant. They all had the appearance of humans, and according to human aesthetics, they were all handsome men and beautiful women. Many women screamed when they saw the handsome youth Demon Eye King and the cold and aloof Blood Thorn Emperor. Their eyes flashed, unwilling to believe that they were those cruel, bloodthirsty, and even man-eating demons. They even felt that even if they were really demons, they must have had their own reasons for eating humans Crimson Moon was holding the Federation chairman in her hand, and her slender, snow-white hand was holding the fat chairman. The contrast was stark. The originally dignified chairman was now like a thin and weak chick without any dignity. Many of the older generation could not believe it and were extremely disappointed. At the same time, they were extremely angry and resentful towards the demon race. However, more young people were extremely curious about Crimson Moon, Bloodthorn Emperor, and the others. At the same time, they also expressed disdain and ridicule towards the powerless Federation chairman. Crimson Moon held the Federation chairman hostage and ordered every city to open the city gates wide, allowing their large army to enter. She also promised many things, such as that they were not demons, that the citizens were deceived by the higher-ups of the Federation, that they had their own reasons for coming here, that they were once of the same race and were expelled by those who had power, and so on. Her words were so sincere that many citizens were shocked. It was as if they had seen a brand new face, and many people believed her on the spot. Crimson Moon had read the memories of the Federation chairman and some officials, as well as the memories of ordinary people and low-level soldiers. Naturally, she knew what kind of impression the Empire had in the minds of the people at all stages of the Federation. Her words were all critical, including the grievances in the hearts of many citizens. Her words quickly turned into another kind of truth, contending with the original justice. Dean looked at the broadcast on his wristwatch. He couldn't help but shake his head and smile when he heard Crimson Moon's words. At this moment, Lin Changsheng was probably going to vomit blood. Even if they completely expelled the demons this time, it would be difficult to explain to the citizens of the Federation. Crimson Moon's words were like a seed that had been planted. Lin Changsheng could only use an iron fist to suppress it and include it in the criminal law. Perhaps it would slowly fade after a decade or so. It's a pity that there is a demon emperor, otherwise she would have become an emperor. Dean thought in his heart. If Crimson Moon held the Federation chairman hostage and directly ordered the legions of the cities to stop, it would instead arouse the blood of the citizens of the Federation. But at this moment, she was using the so-called truth to divide the citizens of the Federation. Many soldiers would even be affected. Even if the battle was lost, it would cultivate a group of spies. Although this seemed not domineering and arrogant enough, but it was far more useful than arrogant words to let the enemy tear a large piece of meat. Dean turned off the wristwatch and put it into the bag. He turned around and continued to rush in the direction of the host city. Although this wristwatch was a Federation item, but if it was simply used, even if Lin Changsheng could appear in any intelligent device of the Federation, he wouldn't know that he was using this wristwatch. After all, it was impossible for him to integrate his consciousness into the host and disperse it to countless devices to monitor everyone who used the device. This would only weaken his own consciousness. In the end, he might even completely lose his own will and turn into a program of the Federation's intelligent host. He might even be erased as an abnormal program. Chapter 1163. Dean looked at the host city for a moment. He turned into a dark shadow and lurked close to the ground. There are detection systems in the sky and underground. Many plants on the ground have been modified with tiny detectors. Dean narrowed his eyes slightly. His dark golden pupils scanned the grass in front of him. He saw that in the middle of the verdant grass, there were many stems embedded with toothpick-sized metal bars. They were very soft. Even if the weeds were trampled on, they wouldn't damage the metal detector inside. Only Lin Changsheng knew about this detector. He used his mechanical legion to secretly set it up to guard against the people of the Federation. This was his lair, his heart. If it was anyone else hiding here, no matter how careful they would turn into a shadow, shrink into a poisonous snake, burrow into the ground, and so on. They would all be seen by Lin Changsheng. With Lin Changsheng's huge computing power, no matter how the human camouflaged, he would be able to speculate the flaws in a second. However, Dean knew about Lin Changsheng's memory, so he was prepared. The detector had a radius of about 50 meters. Moreover, the angle of the detector on each grass was different. As a result, there was no dead angle at all. But it wasn't a problem for him. He could create a dead angle. A pair of shadow wings extended from the back of the shadow that he had transformed into. They were like two giant palms, waving forward in a seemingly slow but actually extremely fast manner. It was as if all the air within a dozen cubic meters had been pushed out, setting off a gentle gust of wind that slowly drifted dozens of meters away, bending the grass where the detector was buried. At the same time, his body quickly moved closer. When the gentle wind stopped, he was already more than 10 centimeters below the grass. His body was submerged in the soil, and he turned into a pangolin-like shadow. With his current genetic editing ability, he could write a strange breathing organ that could absorb oxygen even in the soil. Lin Changsheng is on guard against me. He calculated that I have part of his memory and know about the traps outside the host city. He might try to avoid these traps. It stands to reason that there are other ways to avoid these traps. But with Lin Changsheng's wisdom and the computing power of the host city, he should be able to think of 7 or 8 countermeasures and set up a tighter defense in other places. I'll do the opposite. This path is the safest. However, it is also possible that he has calculated this and has done the exact opposite. He kept the original arrangements at the periphery so that I would lower my vigilance. But when we were deep inside, he did something even more ruthless. Dean was lying on the ground, calculating in his mind. Although his calculation ability couldn't compare to Lin Changsheng's, he could slowly sort out his thoughts. He wasn't in a hurry. The speed of his thoughts didn't affect the accuracy of the results. In this game, he and Lin Changsheng were not the only ones on the chessboard. There is also an unknown moving chess piece, the Demon Emperor. However, the unknown here was only to him. Perhaps the Demon Emperor had long since entered Lin Changsheng's line of sight and was being treated as a game partner by Lin Changsheng. I interfered in the collapse of the first line of defense. Perhaps Lin Changsheng will realize my goal. If that's the case, the Demon Emperor might not be mistaken for me. Dean slowly frowned. He felt that he had acted recklessly before. He shouldn't have intervened in the border war. Based on his understanding of Lin Changsheng, the latter had the ability to calculate the detailed results of the war, including the specific number of casualties and the process and time of the collapse. Although the battlefield was changing rapidly, but Lin Changsheng's calculation ability was too strong. 1 minute of thinking was equivalent to 100 years of thinking. It was enough to calculate the complete situation of the battlefield. However, because of Dean's intervention, the situation of the battlefield was different from Lin Changsheng's calculation. Lin Changsheng would be aware of the heresy and thus guess Dean's purpose. When the game reached the extreme, both sides were basically open cards. Using open cards to confront each other relied on instantaneous changes and judgment. It wasn't like pulling out hidden cards and turning them into killer moves. The worst-case scenario is that Lin Changsheng knows that there are 3 people on the chessboard and has deduced our position. That Demon Emperor also knows of my existence through other means. Everyone has about the same amount of information, and my advantage is gone. Dean was a little worried. Although he knew that this was the worst speculation, he had to prepare for the worst. If I were the Demon Overlord, I might have lurked in the host city a long time ago instead of sneaking in during this sensitive period of war. All the people who enter the host city during this time will be included in the suspect list by Lin Changsheng and closely monitored. Every corner of the city is his eyes. Dean's eyes flashed. Even if the Demon Emperor knows about my existence and knows that someone is waiting for the Oriole behind, there is no way to continue lurking. The war has broken out and Crimson Moon has made a move. The opportunity has appeared and I can't miss it. I just need to wait behind him. However, he may not be willing to let others pick the peach. He will have other arrangements. If I were him, I would make a move now and retreat in defeat. Boom! As Dean was thinking, there was a sudden violent sound. The ground shook and the surrounding grass trembled. Dean's eyes turned golden. Through his eyelids and the soil, he saw the host city in the distance. There was thick black smoke coming out of it. After the loud noise, there was a sudden burst of crackling sound. It seemed that there was a riot in the city. After a while, he seemed to have made a decision. He extended a little shadow, turned it into a small palm, and fanned out a breeze, bending the tender grass implanted with detectors nearby, clearing a blind spot. Then he climbed out of the mud, waved a bigger wind, and rushed forward quickly, avoiding all the detectors in the tender grass, as well as some mechanical snakes and mechanical bugs active in the tender grass. A few minutes later, Dean appeared in the host city. He was familiar with the road and avoided Lin Chongqing's arrangements. When he was about to enter the city, an alarm suddenly sounded around him. The patrolling mechanical soldiers quickly heard the alarm and came over. Countless machine gun fingers pointed at him and issued a humanistic warning. But before the warning was finished, it seemed that something interrupted them and they opened fire. Dean knew that Lin Chongqing had seen this scene through them and forcibly controlled the mechanical soldiers. Moreover, as he had guessed before, he avoided the traps according to Lin Chongqing's memory. He didn't expect to trigger the alarm in the end. It could be seen that this place was well prepared. Whoosh! Whoosh! As soon as the machine gun opened, Dean suddenly felt a sense of danger. This ordinary machine gun made him feel a sense of death. His scalp exploded, and he instantly burst out at full speed. At the same time, a large number of sharp blades emerged from his body. The blades on his body shook like scales and flew out, shooting towards the many mechanical soldiers. Chapter 1164. After dodging the first round of strafing from the mechanical soldiers, Dean saw that the bullets discharged from their machine guns hit the ground, leaving only deep bullet holes. It was not the lasers he had imagined. He frowned slightly, turned around, and shook out a large number of sharp blades again. Like falling leaves, they swept out, and soon the team of mechanical soldiers were cut into pieces of metal, scattering all over the ground. At this time, Dadian skimmed over and came to the front of a robot soldier. He picked up the gun in its hand and skillfully disassembled it. He took out the clip inside. The bullet in the clip was no different from the ordinary alloy bullet. He pinched the bullet with his fingers and broke it. A transparent egg-white mucus flowed out from the bullet head. Dean carefully observed the transparent mucus with his X-ray vision. Suddenly, his pupils shrank as he recognized the true face of this thing. Virus. To be precise, this should be more powerful than the virus secreted from the fangs of ordinary undead. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was the original virus. No wonder he suddenly felt a sense of horror. Once hit by this virus, even if it was just a scratch, he would be infected. Then his genes would go berserk, and he would become an unconscious undead. Looking at the scattered mechanical soldiers, Dean's face was cold. Lin Chongqing did not change the layout of the periphery, but the detection system was buried in the gap. The machine guns of this team of ordinary mechanical soldiers were equipped with the unsolvable undead virus. If he was a little careless, he would die here. No mechanical soldiers made of high-strength alloys are lying in ambush here. They know that with my ability, even intelligent machines, like the Creator's mecha, may not be able to keep me. Instead, they use the most ordinary mechanical soldiers equipped with seemingly ordinary firearms. But the interior of the firearms is modified with special texture. The power of the warhead is higher than armor-piercing bullets. It is enough to hurt me, humph. Dean wanted to understand Lin Chongqing's plan. His eyes were cold. Suddenly, he thought of another thing. Why would Lin Chongqing use the unsolvable undead virus to seize his body? Thinking of this, his body suddenly trembled, and his eyes showed uncontrollable excitement. Although he got Lin Chongqing's memory, it was only a part of the memory. It was incomplete, so he couldn't really know whether Lin Chongqing had mastered the way to solve the undead virus. Lin Chongqing used the unsolvable undead virus to attack him at the moment. Either he didn't care about his body and wanted to kill him, either that, or Lin Chongqing had the antidote in his hands. No matter how one looked at it, the possibility of the latter was far greater than the strong. Although Lin Chongqing had suffered a loss at his hands, he was still someone who had lived for more than 200 years. He would not be angered by these losses and disregard the consequences. Dean thought of Aisha when he thought of the antidote. He had studied in the Randy Company for a long time. He had read a lot of medical experiment data of the Federation. He knew that it was almost impossible to develop an antidote by himself. Even if it was developed, it would take decades or even hundreds of years. Who knew what would happen to Aisha at that time? Who knows if the developed antidote can restore the undead that have been infected for hundreds of years? He couldn't believe it himself. He didn't even dare to imagine it. And before his eyes, hope once again appeared. Dean took a deep breath as he saw several teams of soldiers rushing towards him. He knew that it was Lin Changsheng who had mobilized them. Lin Changsheng was aware that he was sending special robots to this place. He did not stop and quickly rushed into the city, shaking off those mechanical soldiers. Along the way, his body rapidly changed, constantly changing his appearance. He magnified his X-ray vision to the extreme and searched for the residential areas in the city. Only by mixing into the crowd could he escape Lin Changsheng's surveillance. Boom, boom. There was a huge vibration in the distance. Dean suddenly saw 7 or 8 creators' mecha in the sky. They formed a triangle shape. There was an energy bar between each mecha. It seemed that the energy of all the mecha was shared. Dean faintly felt the threat. He sighed in his heart. This place was worthy of being the base camp of Lin Changsheng for more than 200 years. The hidden power was beyond the knowledge of the Federation. However, he knew a little bit about the situation here through Lin Changsheng's memory. At the moment, he quickly got rid of the mechanical soldiers. He crossed the plains of the city, passed through some towns, and came to a city with human residents. His body rapidly transformed. He controlled every inch of his skin and changed his appearance. If he wanted to, he could even change the color of his hair. Ever since he had seen the Bloodthorn Monarch's violent demonization, his understanding of genes had reached a whole new level. During this period, he had also absorbed many magic marks. His demonization control had become even smoother, and he could change the shape of his body at will. Dean sneaked into the human city. At the moment, the city was in a panic. A large number of people were accompanied by mechanical guards into the shelters. Dean also sneaked into one of the shelters. He saw many people took out their wristwatches and read the news, trying to understand the situation outside. Some people were so excited that they took pictures and posted them in their virtual space. Dean took advantage of the crowd and knocked out a beautiful woman next to him. The latter's body softened and fell into his arms. He hugged her and put her arm around his neck. Like a worried little girl, she buried her head in his arms. He took off her watch and put it on his hand. He read the news on the watch while speaking in a gentle voice. The outbreak in the host city was quickly broadcasted to other cities. Although Crimson Moon had held the president of the Federation hostage and occupied the official government platform, there were many private media that could release other news. For example, at this moment, the attack on the host city was also released by the local media. It attracted the attention of other cities and made the atmosphere even more tense. Dean saw the battle outside from the pictures. A dense mechanical army poured into the city and completely occupied the streets. The sky was full of mechas like locusts. These mechas could fly for a short period of time. Amidst the heavy encirclement, a figure dressed in a black robe stood in the sky, as if he was walking on flat ground. He was killing his way through the mechas quickly. His head was covered by a hood, and his face could not be seen clearly. However, with a casual strike, a mecha would be destroyed. From the looks of the destroyed mechas, they were all 4-star mechas. Among them, there were many 5-star mechas that were also destroyed. Dean's eyes slightly narrowed. Is this the Demon Emperor? In terms of strength, he was indeed stronger than ordinary kings. Even he couldn't tear a 4-star mecha with a casual punch. After all, 4-star mechas were already comparable to the Lord of the Abyss. In terms of performance, they were close to kings. It was just that they couldn't fully display their excellent performance. If the Demon Emperor has appeared, why haven't the other 4 kings appeared? Dean frowned slightly. He felt that something was wrong. At this moment, a video was suddenly released in the news. He immediately clicked on it and saw a fierce battle. Several Genesis god mechas that shared energy joined hands to attack the Black-Robed Man, but they were beaten back by the Black-Robed Man. They were moving very fast. The video was very blurry. Ordinary people couldn't see it clearly. However, Dean could see that although the black-robed man was aggressive, he didn't seem to be as strong as he imagined. This is not the Demon Emperor. Dean came to this conclusion. Suddenly, he thought that if the Demon Emperor was going to appear here, the remaining 4 kings couldn't suppress the 2 dragon kings and the many masters of the fire dragon country. Moreover, his speculation at the beginning was that the Empire and the fire dragon country had joined hands. This speculation was the most likely, which meant Chapter 1165. Hey, suddenly, a palm came from behind and patted Dean's shoulder. Dean woke up from his thoughts and was shocked. His perception instantly swept to the person behind him, but found that it was an ordinary civilian with osteoporosis. His tense body could not help but relax, and his mouth slightly twitched. He did not expect to be scared by an ordinary person. "What's the matter?" Dean looked at him. The one who patted Dean's shoulder was a young man. He looked at the woman who was knocked out by Dean in surprise. Suddenly, he noticed a bracelet on her wrist. His eyes widened, and he was furious. He grabbed Dean's clothes and said, "How dare you touch my girlfriend? Do you want to die?" Dean raised his hand and gently shook the young man's wrist. The pain made the young man loosen his grip. "Dean, push him away. Since she is your girlfriend, I'll give her back to you." Dean pushed the unconscious woman into the arms of the young man and squeezed into the crowd. The young man was about to rush up, but he couldn't see Dean's figure. He held the unconscious woman in his arms and glared at the direction of Dean's departure. After a long time, the anger on his face slowly disappeared. "Oh!" The woman woke up from the young man's arms. She covered her head and looked at the young man who was holding her. She was confused. "Who are you?" The young man didn't speak. He seemed to reach out to hug her, but his arms suddenly accelerated and hit the back of the woman's head. She was knocked out again. "He is the variable." The youth stared at the direction of Dean's departure and muttered in an inaudible voice. Dean left the shelter and was ready to go to the location where the host was buried. The Federation's host was buried in the center of the city. The defense system was spread out layer by layer. No matter which angle the attack came from, the difficulty was the same. Dean wasn't worried that Lin Changsheng would move the host. The first reason was that the smart host was huge and connected to a large number of attached machines. The second reason was that there was no safer place than this city in the entire Federation. Once the host was moved out, it was equivalent to throwing gold out of the door. It would be easy for them to find it. Dean avoided the patrolling mechanical soldiers and the surveillance cameras around the city. He carefully lurked forward. When he was 50 miles away from the main computer, he saw from the wristwatch that the black-robed man was killed by the mechanical legion. His body was crushed by the super-ion cannon. He was dead. Dean narrowed his eyes. If he didn't know that the black-robed man was the bait sent by the Demon Emperor, he would have attacked the computer by himself. If the bait wasn't for Lin Changsheng to see, then it was for me to see. The Demon Emperor has most likely found out about my existence. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that my identity is a top secret in the Federation. Only a small portion of the upper echelons of the Terrace Financial Group knows about it, and even those who know about it aren't clear. The only ones who know the truth are probably Jasaloti and a few of the directors who were there back then. Dean's eyes flashed. It was either that the Devil Emperor had arranged a spy, or that the Devil Emperor had disguised himself as one of them. If it was the latter, then it was too terrible. After thinking for a moment, Dean found a pool in a nearby park and hid there. He didn't want to help the Demon Emperor and the others take action. At the bottom of the pool, Dean dug a small hole and hid in it. He used the ability of the Sun Beast to burn the water in the hole, along with the oxygen. With his current ability, he could absorb oxygen from the soil. Even without oxygen, he could survive for several months. He could be called a strange life. He took out the wristwatch and continued to observe the movement outside. He was waiting for the Demon Emperor to launch the attack. A few hours passed. It was dusk. Crimson Moon led the 4 kings to occupy the main city of the Federation and suppress the Federation army from the inside out. The entire Federation could only rely on the private armed forces of the four consortiums to resist. At this moment, countless civilians in the Federation saw how terrifying the private armed forces of the four consortiums were. They weren't any worse than the Federation's army. Moreover, they exposed many military weapons that were more terrifying than the previous one. The Lok Fei Consortium took out the monster mecha that they had secretly researched and displayed a power that even the creator's mecha couldn't match. They resisted a large number of attacks from the abyss. The Milan Consortium provided a large number of arms to all the armies of the 100 cities. This consortium that survived on arms marketing seemed to have an endless supply of ammunition. Moreover, the transportation channels were extremely rich. Even during the time of war, when the cities were blockaded, they were still able to transport a large number of their own ammunition. The Michael Financial Group was the only one of the four major financial groups that did not have anything to do with armed forces. It could be said that the Terrace Financial Group was the only one out of the four major financial groups that did not have anything to do with armed forces. It could be said that the Terrace Financial Group was the only one among the four major financial groups that did not have anything to do with armed forces. It could be said that the Terrace Financial Group was the only one that produced the technological products in every field in the Federation. The Terrace Financial Group would be responsible for almost all of the technological products in the Federation. Regardless of whether it was real estate, firearms, or entertainment, they were all sold by the Michael Financial Group. They had the most distribution channels and the highest reputation. In fact, the Michael Consortium could even use its own business capabilities to kill a product that could become a household name before it even reached the manufacturer's doorstep. At this moment, the amount of money that the Michael Financial Group had poured into the battlefield was enough to suffocate countless civilians. Although they knew that the Michael Financial Group was rich and could easily create a powerful family, they didn't expect this to be nothing. Some people had compared it and were shocked to find that the annual income of the entire federal government wasn't even 1% of the Michael Financial Group's vast financial resources. What was the concept? It meant that the foundation of the Michael Consortium was enough to match the Federation's 100 years of operation. It was a shocking and unbelievable number. The Terrace Consortium had also sent a large number of creators' mecha and various magical technological products to bring great obstacles to the abyss. Dean toured the situation of the Federation. At the moment, the federal government was almost paralyzed. Although most of the Imperial legions had been obliterated by the nuclear bombs, but there were still a lot of them who had survived. Moreover, it seemed that many legions had crossed the peace circle and attacked the 12 border cities of the Federation. They were killing everywhere. The four consortiums can support the situation even without the Federation government. It won't take long for the four kings to retreat. Dean read the news and combined it with Lin Chongqing's memory. Although the current situation had reached the hinterland of the Federation, but the strength of the Empire wasn't enough for them to swallow the entire Federation. The four consortiums were Lin Chongqing's arms and legs. At this moment, they were playing an unimaginable combat power. Lok Consortium had developed a 5-star monster mecha, which could suppress the king. The Abyss had encountered a 5-star monster mecha, but it didn't take long before it was beheaded. Dean knew that the Federation had super Raytheon cannon. This was a city of the Federation, so the energy reserves were enough for the cannon to display a terrifying power. Moreover, the elite mechanical legion created by Lin Chongqing hadn't been dispatched yet. The Demon Emperor's opportunity would be missed when Crimson Moon retreated. The situation had forced him to take action. Dean quietly waited. He was a bit nervous in his heart. If the Demon Emperor didn't take action, then he would have to take action. If he missed this opportunity, it would be very difficult to kill Lin Chongqing. For him, this was also his only chance. His situation was even more dangerous than the Demon Emperor. The Demon Emperor could retreat to the Empire, but he couldn't. The night was approaching. The four kings were being pushed back by the demonic mechas and the creator god mechas, as well as the super Raytheon cannon. Although nuclear weapons couldn't be used in the city, Lin Chongsheng seemed to have already considered such a situation. Just the demonic mechas and the super Raytheon cannon were enough to suppress the four kings. Soon, the first king to be sacrificed appeared. It was the heavily injured blood Thorn Monarch. Chapter 1166. As soon as King Demon I was injured, he immediately withdrew from the battlefield and disappeared without a trace. There were no more news reports about him. Only Crimson Moon and Light King were left on the battlefield, but the Federation's mechanical army and mecha seemed to be endless, especially the creation god mecha. Although its reaction during battle was not as good as the real king, its performance was not bad at all. Once it was damaged, it would immediately withdraw from the battlefield and be replaced by a new mecha, while the injured mecha would return to the factory outside the battlefield for repair. The one who repaired the mecha was also a top-notch professional mecha repairman. In less than 10 minutes, a tattered creation god mecha was refurbished and put into the battlefield again. As long as there was no shortage of parts and materials, the creation god mecha could be repaired continuously and fight continuously. Although Crimson Moon and Light King were brave, it was difficult for two fists to fight four hands. Not to mention there were more than 20 creation god mecha. The depth of their foundation shocked Crimson Moon and Light King, as well as countless Federation residents. They can still bear it. Dean saw the reports on the news. There were too many media, and at this moment, many media risked their lives to go to the edge of the battlefield to broadcast live. Among them, there were also many videos taken by refugees uploaded, so that other cities far away from the battlefield could also see this dangerous and tragic battle. Dean looked at the distant sky. A black curtain and a dazzling sun hung in the sky. It was the respective demonic domains of Crimson Moon and Light King. Their strength had reached the limit of life, like the Supermen of the old era, facing missiles and cannons. Even ion cannons and laser swords could hardly hurt their bodies. However, there was always an end to human strength. When the sky was full of stars, Crimson Moon and Light King had been injured many times, and their momentum was far less powerful than before. However, the Federation suffered more heavy losses. Countless broken mechanical soldiers piled up on the street below the battlefield, and the rest of the 3-star and 4-star mecha were lost in the hundreds. More than a dozen creation god mecha were also destroyed, and nearly 10 of them self-destructed. Dean frowned, his heart getting more and more nervous. More than 10 minutes later, suddenly Dean, who was watching the news, felt the ground shake violently, followed by a dazzling light and a loud noise coming from afar. He looked up and saw the night sky on the other side of the host city burst into a dazzling light, like a rising sun, illuminating more than half of the host city. Dean was relieved. His first thought was that the Demon Emperor couldn't bear it anymore and made a move, which is a good thing for him. He quickly moved from his hiding place and rushed towards the explosion site. At the same time, his see-through eye power expanded to the extreme, and his pupils kept contracting. His golden pupils shrank to the size of a golden bean. His line of sight quickly passed through the skyscrapers, and he saw the situation at the explosion site. There were actually 8 figures that were as vigorous as the sun at the center of the explosion. The heat emanating from their bodies was astonishing. They were all king-level life energies. Dean was aghast. He didn't expect that there were so many kings hidden in this city. The location of the explosion was the location where Lin Chongsheng's mainframe was hiding. A conjecture instantly appeared in his mind. Their previous silence and the use of Crimson Moon and the Light King to restrain the majority of the Federation's combat power was not only to attract Lin Chongsheng's attention, but also to buy time for them to find out the whereabouts of the mainframe. 8 kings. Is this the hidden strength of the Empire? No, the King of Fire Dragon Nation has also come. Dean instantly narrowed his eyes, and his body slightly slowed down. He scanned the surroundings, looking for the hidden Demon Emperor. As matters stood, he was 100% sure that the Demon Emperor was in this city. At least one of the 2 Dragon Kings would come here, and they wouldn't be willing to let the Demon Emperor pick up the Federation's spoils alone. At this moment, Dean saw full metal robots rushing out from the heat of the explosion site. They looked similar to humans, and some of them looked exactly the same. It seemed that they were made from the same batch of molds. Some of them looked grotesque, and they appeared at the center of the high temperature of the explosion. They weren't affected in the slightest. They were the top-level mechanical warriors that Lin Changsheng had arranged to be near the mainframe. Part of Lin Changsheng's memory jumped out in Dean's mind again, and he quickly recognized the models and functions of these mechanical warriors, as well as the attack methods they were good at. Some were good at close combat, and the chip had recorded the evolved moves of countless fighting masters. Some were equipped with terrifying firepower that was enough to kill a king. Every mechanical warrior was comparable to a creation god mecha, and in terms of combat ability, they were stronger than a creation god mecha. Lin Changsheng had done a test, and these mechanical warriors could easily defeat a creation god mecha. However, the mechanical warriors continued to rush out. In the blink of an eye, there were 17 or 18 of them. In the blink of an eye, the number increased to more than 30, and finally the 49th mechanical warrior came out. 49 king-level warriors. Even the odd number was more than the 8 king-level warriors. Dean was already aware of this, but he still felt a strong pressure at the moment. He suddenly wanted to send a message to the Demon Emperor or the 8 king-level warriors and tell them the method to crack this batch of mechanical warriors. At this moment, as the mechanical warriors appeared and guarded the building where the mainframe was buried, the 8 kings seemed to be very proud and did not attack immediately. After observing for a while, only one of them stepped out. This person's body was covered with purple scales, and his body slowly elongated. He crawled on the ground and unexpectedly turned into a lifelike purple-scaled flood dragon. When his body was about 10 feet long, he suddenly looked up to the sky and roared. His body expanded again and unexpectedly became more than 10 feet long. He stood in front of the mechanical warriors and raised his claws to slap the ground. The momentum was terrifying, and the scales on his body were curled up with electric current. It seemed that his body had been strengthened by static electricity. Dean was startled, and there was a trace of pity and indifference in his eyes. These mechanical warriors were different from humans. They didn't have a heat source or murderous aura, and it was difficult to determine the specific strength without fighting. These king-level warriors obviously didn't expect that all the mechanical warriors in front of them were comparable to them. Soon, the demonized, purple-scaled Flood Dragon King was the first to rush out. The electric current around his body gathered at the horn on his head, forming a ball of lightning, and shot out electric currents to strike the mechanical warriors in front of him. Bang! Bang! The electric current hit the mechanical warriors, making crackling sounds and emitting green smoke. However, the mechanical warriors all propped up a defensive shield to resist the electric current, and there wasn't the slightest damage. This scene surprised the purple-scaled Flood Dragon. His magic marks could create strong electric current between his muscles, and it was no less than lightning. It had the ability to restrain these electricity-driven mechanical things. How could it be ineffective at this moment? While he was still in shock, the mechanical warriors that he attacked seemed to have activated a program and immediately attacked. Some of them directly pounced over, and their explosive speed was incomparably fast. In an instant, they rushed in front of the purple-scaled Flood Dragon. They raised their hands and slashed out with white and purple laser blades, cutting open the scales of the purple-scaled Flood Dragon. The cuts were so deep that bones could be seen. Not good. The other 7 were shocked when they saw this scene. They wanted to help, but it was already too late. The purple-scaled Flood Dragon King was surrounded by several mechanical warriors, and it was quickly cut into several pieces. Its body didn't even have time to shrink and demonize before it was killed. The mechanical warriors originally had strength no weaker than the king-level warriors, and they were attacking together. The larger the purple-scaled Flood Dragon's demonized body was, the more areas it would be attacked, and the faster it would die. The others couldn't even help in time. At this time, The eyes of the other mechanical warriors flashed red, and they suddenly moved together, pouncing toward the 7 king-level warriors. Not good. Run. The 7 king-level warriors knew from the moment the mechanical warriors moved that these iron lumps were countless times stronger than the mechanical warriors they had seen in the past. They decisively retreated without the slightest hesitation. The 7 kings had just retreated several thousand meters when they suddenly stopped. They saw an energy barrier surrounded by lightning, like a barrier array, monopolizing their path of retreat and surrounding them inside. The electric current added to the energy barrier caused the air to have a scorching feeling. That purple-scaled flood dragon king is good at controlling lightning. If he doesn't die, then they can escape. Dean sighed when he saw the lightning array. The 7 king-level warriors were like turtles in a jar, and their only way out was behind the lightning array. Although the mechanical warriors were terrifying, the biggest drawback was that they couldn't move too far away from a host. The limit of their distance was where the lightning array rose. The reason why they couldn't move too far away was because of the problem of energy. As early as the Old Era, the concept of science and technology had already crossed the solar system and looked beyond the galaxy. But because of the problem of energy, they couldn't even leave the solar system. This problem was also bothering the Federation and Lin Changsheng. Although they had made new breakthroughs in a new energy source, the energy consumption of these mechanical warriors was too large, and they had to be recharged at all times. The area where they moved was like a huge charging board. Once they left, they would lose the ability to move, and it would be difficult to exert their strength. Chapter 1167. Just when the 7 kings were forced into desperation, there was a sudden roar. The huge fireball blasted a hole in the energy shield, forming a temporary gap. Seeing this gap, the 7 kings went through without saying anything. Outside the gap, there was a middle-aged dragon man with red scales all over his body. He had a sharp horn on top of his head, and his body was emitting terrifying heat. The air within a few meters around him was slightly distorted. Dean's face changed when he saw this person. From Lin Changsheng's memory, he recognized that this was one of the 2 dragon lords of the Fire Dragon country. His title was Candle Dragon Lord, and he was in charge of the north of the Fire Dragon country. The other was Flame Dragon Lord, and he was in charge of the south of the Fire Dragon country. He didn't expect that this attack on the Federation would be an alliance between the Fire Dragon country and the Empire. The strongest people in the world are gathered here. The top group of powerhouses are also here. Dean's eyelids twitched slightly. This was not a casual war, but a pinnacle war. The outcome was directly related to the future of mankind. At the same time, after Lord Torch Dragon raised his hand and blasted open the lightning energy shield, he waited for the 7 kings to gather around him. His face was completely red, and his hair and beard were all standing on end. He raised his hand and pushed forward. The center of his palm was as red as a soldering iron. This red energy left his palm and grew bigger and bigger in the air, turning into a burning palm. It slapped the slowly recovering lightning energy shield and hit a mechanical warrior directly. The scorching energy directly destroyed the energy shield outside the mechanical warrior and imprinted on its body. With a bang, the fiery palm suddenly tightened and grabbed the mechanical warrior. With a whoosh, it was pulled back and appeared in front of Lord Torch Dragon. As soon as the mechanical warrior's body left the lightning energy shield, the red light in its mechanical compound eyes dimmed. It didn't even have time to brandish its weapon when its body stiffened and became motionless. Candle Dragon Lord's eyes flashed. He grabbed it and threw it thousands of meters away. It seems to have lost its target. These mechanical warriors will stop attacking if they leave the lightning energy shield. The 7 kings were surprised and doubtful when they saw this, but they were more excited. If this was the case, they still had a chance to fight back. Otherwise, they could only flee. After all, the joint attack of nearly 50 kings was too terrifying. These mechanical warriors can't leave this area. Grab them or push them away. Candle Dragon Lord said slowly. The previous method had confirmed his information, and he immediately informed the seven kings. At the same time, he once again raised his hand and sent out two flaming palms, blasting open the lightning energy shield and grabbing the two mechanical warriors inside, preparing to pull them out. However, before the flaming palms could retract, the mechanical warriors next to them attacked and smashed the palms. The other seven kings knew the way to break the barrier. They attacked from the outside of the lightning energy barrier. Some of them threw out vine-like weapons, piercing through the lightning energy barrier and locking onto the mechanical warriors, dragging them out. Some of the arms went berserk and became dozens of feet long. They tore apart the lightning energy shield, and the back of the hands emitted lightning. They were not afraid of the lightning on the energy shield, and they grabbed a bunch of mechanical warriors and threw them out. These mechanical warriors either resisted, dodged, or counterattacked, but compared to the kings, they lacked the ability to transform. They could only rely on their alloy bodies to fight. The king's attack power couldn't break the special alloy outside their bodies, but they could drag them. Once they were dragged out of the lightning energy shield, the mechanical warriors would lose their energy supply. The energy stored in their bodies wouldn't be enough to support one attack, and their bodies would immediately freeze. It must be known that their speed and every attack were at the king level, and the energy they needed was extremely astonishing. Their small bodies were stuffed with all kinds of weapons, and there was no extra space to install a large capacity energy board. Once the energy board was too large, it would become their weakness, and it would be easy to target. Dean looked at the mechanical warriors being dragged out one after another. Although their bodies were unscathed, they lost their energy as soon as they left the lightning energy shield and turned into scrap iron. This terrifying army that was enough to flatten any country was disintegrated. He couldn't help but sigh. At the same time, he was a bit afraid of the Fire Dragon country. The weakness of this mechanical army was top secret. Apart from Lin Changsheng, only a few chairmen of the Terrace Consortium knew about it. Even Lin Changsheng didn't know about it, and it was covered up by Lin Changsheng. He didn't expect the Dragon King of the Fire Dragon country to know about it. It was hard to imagine how deep their infiltration into the Federation was. Maybe they had secretly infiltrated and grasped this information decades, or even hundreds of years ago. But even if they know this secret, it's still too difficult to break through here, Dean thought. At this time, the remaining 40 or so mechanical warriors suddenly retreated to the front of the building where the mainframe was located, away from the energy shield's boundary. The Seven Kings and the Candle Dragon King's attacks couldn't extend so far. After all, the lightning energy shield was also an attack weapon that couldn't be underestimated, and they couldn't extend their genetic demonization into it. We can't do anything if they stay there. Damn, the hidden strength of the Federation is too terrifying. These iron lumps can be built as long as there are resources. Unlike us, we can't rely on materials to cultivate them. The Seven Kings stood outside the energy shield, angry and anxious, but helpless. The Candle Dragon King said calmly, "Don't worry. If they don't come out, then let them stay here forever." The Seven Kings looked at him, their eyes full of awe. They didn't dare to rashly ask. Not long after, a series of explosions suddenly came from the distance. The flames of the explosions lit up the night sky, attracting everyone's attention. Battle Network. Dean was slightly startled when he saw the direction of the explosions, and then his eyes narrowed. The explosions were as continuous as a mountain range, and the flames extended for a very long time. They all exploded at the same time in a very short period of time, destroying the 3 supercomputers that assisted the mainframe in computing. If these 3 supercomputers were destroyed, nearly half of the Federation's instruments would be paralyzed. Just when everyone was shocked, the Candle Dragon King's eyes suddenly flashed, and he whispered, "Retreat." After that, he took the lead to withdraw. The Seven Kings were startled, but their reaction wasn't slow, and they quickly followed. The moment they left the lightning energy shield, A ray of light cut through the sky like a signal flare, falling toward the city, and the target was the building where the mainframe was located. Missiles were launched from all around the city at the same time, trying to intercept this ray of light, but figures flew out from the darkness, blocking all the intercepting weapons and mechanical warriors. Chapter 1168. Dean could see the internal structure of the Dawn. It was a nuclear bomb. If not for the interceptor missiles, he would have thought that Lin Changsheng was ready to self-destruct. If this was the case, it could only mean that the host city was a pit arranged by Lin Changsheng. It was beyond his expectation that everyone would be buried. But now it seemed that the missile should come from the Empire or the Fire Dragon country. He thought of the airships and other technological items built by the Empire on the God of War's wall. With the technology of the Empire, it was not difficult to imagine that they could build a nuclear bomb. Since the nuclear bomb was not released by Lin Changsheng, Dean didn't plan to escape. His position at the moment was more than 10 miles away from the center of the explosion. Even if the nuclear bomb exploded, it wouldn't hurt him. Moreover, Lin Changsheng wouldn't just stand by and watch. As Dean was quietly watching the changes, the nuclear bomb fell like the dawn. Suddenly, from the front of the building where the host was buried, the street-like ground was raised like a metal plate. From the inside, 2 dark holes were exposed. Inside were triangular launchers. The energy quickly gathered and shot. 2 blue light beams instantly penetrated the sky and hit the nuclear bomb. Boom! The nuclear bomb was detonated in midair. For a moment, the world lost its color. After a huge rumble, the world suddenly became silent. His ears seemed to fall into a very long period of tinnitus. He couldn't hear any sound. In his sight, there was a sudden burst of strong light in midair. The world was snow-white. Even Dean's eyes were slightly squinted by the light. He felt a burst of pain. If an ordinary person looked directly at this distance, even if they closed their eyes, they would be blind through the eyelids. In the silence, Dean felt the ground under his feet tremble. It seemed that the earth was trembling in fear. The next moment, the world seemed to recover from the silence. In the middle of the explosion, a burst of blazing light swept out. Like a beam of light, it spread in all directions and submerged everything. Any color in front of this strong light was overshadowed. The world became pure white. All the buildings were submerged in the light. Apart from the deep darkness that shrouded everything, there was also this extremely dazzling light. Dean squinted his eyes as he tried to observe the power of the nuclear bomb. He was able to see the buildings near the explosion site of the nuclear bomb. The high temperature and radiation quickly crushed everything like a cutting machine. The heat wave quickly spread out in all directions. A large number of buildings were turned into ashes or scorched by the high temperature. It seemed that they were going to melt. The building where the mainframe was buried was razed to the ground, and the street on the ground showed signs of melting. The street looked like it was made of bricks, but it was actually made of metal, and it melted and deformed under the high temperature. Master Torch Dragon and the 7 Kings were not at the center of the explosion. At this moment, they had all turned into layers of demonic limbs that collapsed under the high temperature, but they did not suffer much injury. When the explosion swept in front of Dean, he quickly absorbed the heat source in the air. At the same time, his body turned into a huge rock. Under the destruction of the explosion, pieces of stone shell broke out, but the real body at the core was not affected. Soon, the nuclear bomb explosion gradually subsided. Master Torch Dragon and the 7 Kings rushed to the place where the mainframe was buried. They saw that the huge war castle-like building had disappeared. More than 40 mechanical warriors guarding in front of the building had also disappeared. There was no trace left on the ground. They were all obliterated. That's way too terrifying. Don't be so optimistic. I saw them hiding in the underground base below. Soon, some kings who didn't notice the underground base also noticed that there was an underground base under the raised building. Their faces suddenly changed. If more than 40 mechanical warriors were guarding the underground base, they would have no way to deal with them unless they launched another nuclear bomb. Thinking of this, some people looked at Master Torch Dragon and waited for him to make a decision. Dean's eyes flashed. He knew that Lin Changsheng was left with his last card. More than 40 mechanical warriors, although not destroyed, had lost their role. The purpose of a nuclear bomb was not to directly destroy this place, but to destroy the city's power grid and energy supply system. Under the baptism of the nuclear bomb, the city's power grid was completely paralyzed. The nearby energy supply channels were also destroyed. The remaining energy supply channels were not enough to support so many mechanical warriors. This underground base was Lin Changsheng's nest and also his tortoise shell. Even if another nuclear bomb was launched, it would not be able to blow up this underground base. The entire base was made of a special alloy, which was extremely precious. Its hardness was more than 300 times that of diamond. Lin Changsheng had invested more than 200 years of accumulation in this place. This was the reason why Lin Changsheng could not move the mainframe out of the city. The materials of the king's mechanical warriors were fused with some incomplete special base alloy, but it was enough to resist the attack of the king. This underground base was enough to withstand the bombardment of thousands of missiles. Even if it was blocked by a nuclear bomb, the only way to break it was to use some extremely special magic marks. Some magic marks could digest stones, some could melt metals, and some could feed on flames. As far as Dean knew, there were some magic marks that were targeted at this special alloy base. They should have learned the changes of the magic marks before coming here. Dean's eyes flashed. He was ready to let them take the lead. As he expected, the Torch Dragon Master had already brought the 7 kings to the underground base. Their bodies transformed and melted into the special alloy base like mucus, disappearing very quickly. Dean tried to use his X-ray vision to penetrate the underground base, but was blocked. The materials of the underground base were similar to the materials of the demonic insects and the origami spaceship. It should be known that these spaceships were the spaceships that had crossed the starry sky to come to the Earth. The density of the spaceships was extremely astonishing. If one didn't have the few magic marks, it would be impossible to crack it. Dean didn't rush to follow them in. Instead, he waited in place. When the nuclear bomb was launched, many mysterious figures appeared in the sky to resist the intercepting missiles. This made him a little afraid. In the dark outside, the Demon Emperor was still covetously watching. Chapter 1169. After Master Candle Dragon and the rest of them snuck into the underground base, peace was gradually restored on the ground, and the aftermath of the nuclear explosion died down too. However, the heat in the air was still lingering, and their vision seemed to be somewhat cloudy and twisted. A few minutes passed in silence, but Dean didn't see the Demon Emperor appear. It seemed that the Demon Emperor was watching or staying outside to support Candle Dragon Lord and the others. Dean was determined to wait outside. Time ticked by. Dean's anxiety was also growing rapidly every minute and second. Suddenly, a beep sound came from his hand. He was startled and looked down. It was the watch that he took from the woman's hand. It was ringing. When he looked down, a face suddenly flashed on the wristwatch and occupied the entire surface. Lin Changsheng. Dean's pupils shrank, but soon restored his calmness. He stared at Lin. "You knew my position and have been monitoring me with this? Help me." Lin Changsheng didn't respond to Dean's words, but directly said, "Come in and help me. I didn't expect the Fire Dragon country to join in. The Demon Emperor is lurking in the dark outside. I don't know his position. Come help me." Dean raised his eyebrows. "Are you drunk or not awake?" Lin Changsheng looked straight at him. His expression was like that of a robot without any reaction. He said word by word, "I know how to treat the undead. I have a way in my hands. If you want to know, come in and help me. Otherwise, if the host is destroyed or restarted, the top secret information will be destroyed. You will never find a solution by yourself." After that, his avatar flickered like an electric current and disappeared. Dean looked at the watch that returned to normal. His face turned gloomy and his fingers clenched into fists. Although intuition told him that 90% of Lin Changsheng was lying. After all, he had plundered part of Lin Changsheng's memory, and there was no way to deal with undeads. However, he didn't dare to gamble. If it was true, then he would miss it forever. Dean clenched his teeth and rushed out. His body quickly changed. He dived into the underground base and penetrated through the special alloy. It was a wonderful feeling. After penetrating the outer shell of the base, Dean saw the internal structure of the base. It turned out to be an extremely empty metal room. It was like a container magnified hundreds of times. There were no small rooms or offices to rest and work. It was full of various machines. Some were auxiliary hosts, some were maintenance robots, and some were fighting robots. However, at this moment, this place was in a mess. The wreckage of the king's mechanical warriors from before was scattered all over the ground, and many instruments had been destroyed. There were also 2 corpses of the kings lying on the ground, their heads and bodies split into pieces. A large hole had been blasted open in a place where a large number of pipes were densely packed. At this moment, the sounds of intense fighting could be heard, as well as mournful roars. These roars sounded like demons, but also like evil spirits. It was terrifying to hear. Dean heard this completely inhuman roar, and his heart suddenly went cold. 2 words flashed in his mind: undead. He suddenly remembered that Lin Changsheng still had the undead army in his hands. Even if the nuclear bomb destroyed the energy channels around the base and turned the king's mechanical warriors into scrap iron, there was still the undead army. Thinking of this, Dean looked at the corpses of the 2 kings. He found that the corpses were not destroyed by machines or hot weapons, but torn apart. The method was extremely bloody and cruel. He turned his skin into stone and slowly approached the hole. Looking at it from the corner of his eye, Don saw a terrifying scene. Below the hole was the 2nd floor of the underground base. At this moment, there were monstrous limbs dancing in the air. Giant octopus-like tentacles were waving around, and there was no sign of a human being. Under the attack of these violent, demonized, monstrous limbs, a figure with disheveled hair bared his fangs and brandished his claws. His movements were rough and violent, and although he burst forth with astonishing speed, there was not the slightest heat reaction from his body. Undead, Dean saw the figure with disheveled hair, and his face changed. He didn't expect that Lin Changsheng would really leave an undead to guard here. Moreover, the strength of this undead was so strong that he felt the crisis of death. It was far more terrifying than the average king. Black Wind can't hold on any longer. If it dies, the host will fall into the hands of Candle Dragon. Lin Changsheng's figure appeared on a broken instrument next to Dean. He looked at Dean with no expression. "If you want to know the way to save the undead, then help me." Dean's face sank as he said, "Do you have other cards in your hand? I don't believe that you didn't expect that the Fire Dragon country would intervene. This scene should have long been within your calculations. What is your plan? Are you going to catch us all in one fell swoop?" Lin Changsheng said expressionlessly, "I'm not an omnipotent god. It's impossible to calculate everything. Moreover, I didn't expect them to smuggle a nuclear bomb into the territory. There are traitors in the high level of the Federation. Although I can monitor every corner of the Federation through a variety of instruments, but not all the monitored information will be fed back to my brain. Otherwise, if I know everyone's secrets, my consciousness would have long been squeezed to death. It's hard to fathom people's minds. Even I can't see the thoughts in other people's hearts, just like I couldn't see the thoughts in your heart." Dean sneered. "Do you think I will believe you? I'm beginning to suspect that you arranged a team of ordinary mechanical soldiers to shoot me with special undead virus bullets. The purpose is to pull me to help you at this moment. You want me to believe that you have a way to solve the undead. You know what I want, so you can figure out my thoughts." Lin Changsheng expressionlessly said, "It's meaningless to say these words. Even if I say it, you may not believe me. In short, if you want to solve the problem of the undeads, then help me. If you don't want it, then when Black Wind is defeated, I will detonate all the nuclear bombs under the city and die with you." Dean's heart was cold, but soon he was relieved. With his ability, as long as he rushed to the air in time and was not in the center of the explosion, he should be able to survive. "I'll say it first. I'll help you repel the Candle Dragon Lord. but you have to tell me the way to deal with the undead. I won't help you with anything else. You know why I came here. The grievances between us can't be resolved. Dudian said in a cold voice. Lin Changsheng indifferently said, All right. Dean didn't say anything more. He took a deep breath, turned around, and jumped into the hole. The arrangement of various genes appeared in his mind. The genes in his body were active like boiling water. Chapter 1170. Be careful behind you. Dean heard an angry shout as he appeared on the second floor of the base. There were 7 or 8 huge monsters on the second floor. They were like angry monsters. All of them were 10 or 20 meters in size. Some of them were like octopuses with a lot of blood-red tentacles. Some of them were like crocodiles and pangolins with a mouth full of sharp teeth. Some of them were like cobras, but their bodies were 30 or 40 meters long. They were as thick as a water tank and had fin-like blades on both sides of their body. The most eye-catching one was a mythical dragon whose whole body was burning with flames. The difference was that it didn't have antlers on top of its head, but sharp horns like a dead tree. There were 7 or 8 2-meter-long spikes on its back. There were purple whiskers on both sides of its body. They seemed to be close to the body, but it seemed that they could turn into sharp blades at any time. Terrifying heat radiated from the fire dragon's body, and the other monsters around it also avoided it. Dean judged that the fire dragon should be the incarnation of the Candle Dragon Lord. At the moment, it was fighting with an undead with disheveled hair. The undead's appearance was close to that of a human. Its hair was solid, and its pupils were blood red. Its arms were half as long as a human's. There were 6 or 7 fingers on its palms, which looked like claws. There were black blades on its knees and back. Its movements were extremely fast. It was like a shadow shuttling between the transformed bodies of the 7 kings. One of the kings who didn't participate in the battle noticed Dean as he appeared. He immediately shouted to remind Dean. Dean quickly scanned the battlefield situation and the positions of the kings. He made judgments and prepared for the battle. At the same time, he noticed that the structure of the room was extremely wide. The surrounding walls were made of metal. There was no furniture or sundries like the first floor. There was a giant tree-like instrument behind the battle. It extended complex pipes and twisted intestines. There was a translucent energy shield in front of the instrument. One of the kings stretched out his limbs and slapped the energy shield. It seemed that the energy shield bounced back in a blood mist. Go to hell. The king who didn't participate in the battle roared and rushed towards Dean. He saw through the heat source that Dean's physique was similar to his, so he didn't hesitate to rush up. Dean noticed that the nearest king monster was rushing towards him. This monster was 7 or 8 meters tall and had sharp claws. It didn't seem to be very aggressive. Dean noticed that the other 2 kings were also rushing towards him. He took a deep breath, and a trace of madness flashed in his eyes. His body swelled to more than 10 meters, and the sharp blades on his body extended like a sea urchin. However, the sharp blades were more flexible than the spikes on the surface of the sea urchin. At this moment, he was waving his blades in a disorderly manner, but the latter's line of sight was blocked. Die! Dean roared in a low voice. In the blink of an eye, he collided with the huge raccoon-like monster. At the moment of impact, the hairs on the latter's body grew crazily and wrapped around Dean's blade like a sponge, trying to wrap the blade. Dean felt that there were layers of obstacles on the blade. It seemed that there were innumerable strands of power pulling the blade, but the next moment, the pulling force suddenly disappeared. The high temperature attached to the blade burned all the puffy hair of the Raccoon King. Puff, 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 puff. The blade cut into the body of the Raccoon King. Although it didn't directly cut off the body, the cuts were deep enough to see the bones. Just as Dean's blade hit the opponent, he suddenly felt a slight pain in his chest. He couldn't help but glance over and saw that there was a crack on his petrified chest. He didn't know when the attack had hit him. Whoosh! At the same time, the Raccoon King pulled back and landed in the distance. There was a bit of shock in his eyes. It seemed that he didn't expect Dean's attack to be so terrifying. It almost cut his body into several pieces. If he hadn't observed the genes of a 5-star legendary monster with extremely terrifying defense, and if he hadn't used his internal bones and flesh to construct the body of the 5-star legendary monster, then he would have been killed directly. What a terrifying blade. Fortunately, he has already been hit by my stinger. After I kill him, I can carefully observe the structure of his blade. The Raccoon King secretly calculated in his heart. His eyes had become a little fiery as he looked at Dean. In his eyes, Dean was already a dead man. The Raccoon King was best at using poison. Because of this, there was no place for him to use his skills in the face of the terrifying undead. After all, the undead virus in the opponent's body was the world's most insoluble and most terrifying poison. It was enough to obliterate and assimilate all venom and bacteria. Dean didn't feel that the wound was deep, so he didn't care. The attack power of the demonized monster wasn't strong, and his petrified body was relatively hard. Just as he was about to attack again, he suddenly felt that something was wrong. There was a burst of pain in his chest. It was only a short period of time, from beginning to end. He quickly used his X-ray vision to look inside his body. What he saw shocked him. He saw that the inside of his petrified chest had turned black. The petrified body seemed to be moldy, and fine hair was growing out. This is poison? But my body is petrified. How could I be poisoned? Dean's heart was pounding. In this situation where he was outnumbered, if he was poisoned again, it was unknown whether he could survive. Moreover, the other two kings had already rushed over and launched an attack. He immediately used his sharp limbs to push himself away from the attacks of the two kings and retreated to the corner of the room. Facing the two kings who continued to rush over, Dean didn't have time to think about why his petrified body would turn black and be infected. Moreover, the black part was rapidly spreading at an extremely alarming speed. He fiercely clenched his teeth and used his X-ray vision to look into the depths of the black hairy substance. Suddenly, he saw countless black balls and particles spreading and splitting. At the same time, he split his attention into two. His entire body burned with raging flames, and he added them to his sharp blades, causing them to burn with flames. He quickly waved them around, creating a fire blade shield around his body, cutting off and burning the limbs of the two kings that were attacking him. The two kings screamed in pain and were somewhat horrified. They didn't expect Dean's strange blade limbs to be so terrifying. There was no hindrance in cutting their bodies. If their bodies were cut, wouldn't they be cut into two on the spot? While constantly waving the sharp blades to set up the fire shield, another part of Dean's mind was on the black hairy thing. In his eyes, the thing was constantly moving primitive changes, splitting, invading, swallowing. All these changes fell into his eyes. The structure of the monster was much more complex than the other demonized limbs, but the trajectory of the movement was repeated over and over again. Don't worry, he has been poisoned by me. Soon his whole body will be infected. Raccoon King climbed to the side of the other two kings who had rushed over to support. He looked at the fireblade shield in front of him with a leisurely look. The two kings next to him looked at each other and hesitated. They didn't have much confidence in the latter's poison, but Dean's sharp blades were too sharp and attached a terrifying flame temperature. They couldn't attack for a while unless they used some means to hurt themselves. But that was a bit not worth it. Moreover, they were still in the hinterland of the Federation. Who knew what dangers they would encounter? At this time, it was better to preserve their strength to deal with the unknown. At this time, an angry roar came from another place. They saw the Candle Dragon Lord and several other kings surrounding the horrifying undead, but only the flames on the Candle Dragon Lord's body could suppress the horrifying undead. The attacks of the other kings were easily avoided. In addition, the latter was only about 3 meters in size, nearly half the height of a normal human. But in front of the demonized bodies of the other kings, it seemed incomparably small, like a flexible mouse. This undead's fighting mentality is the same as a human's. Part of the attention of the Raccoon King and the other two kings was always on the Candle Dragon Lord and the horrifying undead. At this moment, they couldn't help but feel shocked when they saw that they couldn't attack for a long time. especially the fighting methods of the undead. It was flexible and changeable, completely unlike the ordinary undead who only knew how to fight head-on. Poof! At this moment, one of the kings with blood-colored tentacles that looked like an octopus was suddenly seized by the horrifying undead. It hit the root of the blood-colored tentacle and directly sank into it, drilling into the king's body. The king suddenly screamed in horror. One of the blood-colored tentacles suddenly trembled violently and then bloomed like a flower bud. From it, a naked young man was thrown out and flew behind the Candle Dragon Lord. When a young man flew out, the giant octopus-like demonic body stopped moving. A cold light flashed in the eyes of the Candle Dragon Lord's demonized fire dragon. It suddenly spat out a large amount of flames, engulfing the empty demonic body. At the same time, it entangled the undead and waved its sharp claws to tear it apart. Boom! When the Candle Dragon Lord tore apart the main body of the empty demonic body, the horrifying undead drilled out of one of the inconspicuous tentacles. It turned and pounced on another king nearby, scaring the king into turning around and running away. Bloodhand has lost his demonic body and can no longer fight. I'll go support him. A white tiger-like king with a mouth full of wild boar fangs beside the raccoon king said in a low voice. He was about to rush into the battlefield. Suddenly, the rapidly waving sharp blades in front of them slowly stopped. The flames dissipated, revealing Dean's body. Poison. The raccoon king's eyes lit up when he noticed this scene. However, when he saw Dean's appearance, his face changed and he cried out, "How is this possible?" At this moment, the stony skin on Dean's chest had healed, and there was no sign of blackening around the wound. This made the raccoon king incredulous. Dean's poison was more like a curse than a poison. It was a special super substance that could be destroyed and assimilated whether it was a stone or a tree. If it was flesh and blood, the speed of destruction would be even more astonishing. In his opinion, this was an undefeatable existence. With just this skill alone, he could easily kill demonic beasts as effortlessly as taking something out of his pocket. But at this moment, his poison seemed to have lost its effect. But he had clearly noticed that Dean was indeed poisoned. The two kings next to him noticed the raccoon king's expression and immediately knew that the situation was not right. Their faces slightly changed as they stared at Dean with vigilance. "Is this what you are good at? Using poison to attack?" Dean looked at the raccoon king with a very serious expression. He doubtfully asked, "Why did you choose such a stupid way of fighting? It doesn't make any sense, does it?" The raccoon king's face changed. He felt his face burning, especially after boasting in front of the two kings next to him. In the blink of an eye, he was slapped in the face. He slightly gritted his teeth and didn't argue with Dean. He growled, "I miscalculated. Let's go together." The two kings next to him nodded slightly. There was a dignified look in their eyes as they rushed towards Dean from both sides. Using poison as a means of attack is very easy to crack. As long as you know the structure of this thing, you can change your cells into the same substance, assimilate it, and then change back into your own body. But looking at him, it seems that I can't solve this poison. Could it be that other kings can't learn genetic demonization as fast as I can? Dean looked at the three kings who were rushing towards him. In his heart, he was not as worried as before. He had vaguely guessed this when he was dealing with the strange poison. His body was different from ordinary kings. Although kings could learn other genes and carry out corresponding changes, there seemed to be some restrictions. But his body couldn't. This was the fundamental reason why Lin Changsheng coveted his body. And this also meant that he could grow quickly. For example, he had mastered the strange poison that the raccoon king was confident in. Whoosh! The sharp blades on Dean's body suddenly extended and turned into dozens of sharp spears. They stabbed at the three kings who were surrounding him. More than a dozen sharp blades stabbed at the raccoon king, while the other 30 sharp blades attacked from various angles towards the white tiger king. The remaining blades released flames and attacked the scorpion-like king from the right. Chapter 1171. At the moment of the fight, Dean felt a burst of resistance in the air through his sharp blades. It came from the direction of the Scorpion-like King. There seemed to be an inexplicable repulsive force around the Scorpion King, which slowed down the attack speed of his blades. However, the other dozen of his blades hit the Raccoon King. The latter's fluffy body turned into layers of soft shields, wrapping around the blades like a sponge. However, the flames attached to the blades burned the fluffy and cut the blades directly into the Raccoon King's body. But this time the Raccoon King was prepared. The fluffy growth on his body was extremely thick, which greatly reduced the damage of the blades. The Raccoon King's face changed slightly. He didn't expect to be injured by Dean, even though he was prepared. He was about to turn around and attack again, but he suddenly felt that something was wrong with his body. The wounds that Dean had made showed no signs of healing. He didn't have time to examine them. He first withdrew from the battle, then retracted the fur around his wounds to look. He suddenly saw that 7 or 8 wounds had been cut, and the color had turned black. Poison. The Raccoon King was stunned. He was too familiar with the signs of poisoning. It turned out to be his own poison. The next moment, he suddenly reacted. He looked incredulously at Dean, who was besieged by the White Tiger and Scorpion Kings. Could it be that the latter had analyzed his poison and copied his ability in such a short time? Every king could analyze other abilities to control their body, learn from the genetic level, and then master new abilities. But it took time. Just analyzing the structure of an ability required extremely detailed observation, and learning it took a lot of time. Some abilities conflicted with the body. Even if they were analyzed, they couldn't learn it. They had to choose the ability that was suitable for them. In the Raccoon King's impression, only the Candle Dragon Lord and the Cheelin Dragon Lord could quickly learn and master new abilities. But when it came to complex abilities, the learning time would increase correspondingly. The specific length depended on the individual's perception. For example, the Raccoon King's ability was a 5-star legendary magic mark. Plus, he had studied different poisons for many years. He had observed their toxins and combined them with various poisons to develop his own unique poison ability. Even the Candle Dragon Lord would need a lot of time to crack it, but the other side had mastered it in just a few minutes. Raccoon King suddenly remembered the 2 kings who were still fighting against Dean. Be careful. His blade has my venom. Don't get hurt by him. In fact, the White Tiger King and the Scorpion King also avoided Dean's blade. From a first contact, the 2 of them felt the sharpness of the blade. Moreover, they didn't know Dean's ability, so they didn't dare to be hit easily. They had rich combat experience in their lives. Some people would smear the Walking Dead virus on their weapons. Even if the opponent was weaker than them, it could still be fatal. Therefore, they would never be careless. Like a lion fighting a rabbit, they would use all their strength. After the reminder, the Raccoon King saw that they had temporarily suppressed Dean, so he didn't think much about it. He quickly mobilized the genes in his body to assimilate the poison. Although the venom was terrible, it was his own poison after all, so it was basically ineffective against him. However, just as he was thinking about this, he suddenly realized that the genes he mobilized were unable to assimilate this part of the poison. In fact, the part of the venom he had transformed into was being melted by this part of the venom. How is this possible? The Raccoon King was stunned. He suspected that he had sensed wrongly. Once again, he transformed the tissues around the poison part into venom and assimilated it. But soon, the tissues that had been transformed into venom were quickly absorbed by the poison part, and the speed of infection was even faster. The Civet Cat King turned pale with fright and suddenly came to a realization. The poison part seemed to be a sign of infection from his own venom, but the poison was different from his own venom. Not only had his opponent broken through his venom, but he had also mixed in another venom composition, causing this venom to become even more potent than his own venom. Poison was his specialty, but at this moment he was being crushed by someone else's poison. The Raccoon King's face was ashen, but he was more afraid. He didn't have Dean's understanding and ability to quickly analyze the gene structure and learn how to copy it. Moreover, he knew the horror of his venom. Even if he cut off this part of the flesh, it would be useless. The venom had already invaded the whole body through the blood, but it was dormant everywhere. Do I have to abandon this body? Damn it! Damn it! Raccoon King's expression kept changing. In the end, he gritted his teeth and growled. All the fur on his body contracted, and his forehead cracked open. A pink, fleshy worm crawled out. This worm was as thick as a baby's arm and was 2 to 3 meters long. Even with Raccoon King's huge demonized head, he could only barely accommodate the worm's body. There was a thin mucous membrane outside the worm's body. It was like a slippery liquid. After the worm crawled out, the mucus on its body also fell off. After it fell to the ground, its body twisted a few times, and sweat-like mucus overflowed from its body to form a protective film. I can't intervene in this battle anymore. I can only leave it to them. I hope they can completely strangle this ice demon embryo. The pink worm turned its head and glanced at the battle in the direction of Candle Dragon Lord. It looked at the besieged Dean. There was a trace of unwillingness in its eyes. It twisted its body and merged into the metal wall. It left the underground base and came to the surface. There's still that damn desolate magic puppet in the dark. I don't have a body, so I have to leave quickly. After the pink worm appeared on the ground, for narrow cracks appeared on its head. There were blood-red eyes inside. The pink worm vigilantly scanned the surroundings. After seeing that there was no danger, it immediately rushed towards one of the cracks. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept over and swept up the pink devil bug that was speeding away. A slender and pale hand strangled the pink devil bug. The owner of the hand was wearing a black robe with dark gold trimmings and a huge hood. His face was hidden in the shadows, but the tip of his nose was extremely white. Flameworm, where are you going? Why did you abandon your body? The black-robed man's voice was soft, and there was a hint of ridicule in it. The pink worm was so scared that its 4 eyes widened, and it screamed, "Let me go, and let Candle Dragon Lord know that you violated the agreement. He will definitely start a war with your devil kingdom. It's fine as long as he doesn't know." The black-robed man gently smiled and pulled down the hood on his head, revealing an incomparably handsome face with a hint of melancholy. This face was impeccably handsome and perfect. At this moment, there was a smile at the corner of his mouth. He suddenly opened his mouth, and in an instant his mouth was 1/2 meter wide. His originally beautiful white teeth, in an instant, turned into a mouth full of ferocious, sharp teeth. Chapter 1172. In a corner of the second floor of the base, Dean noticed that the Raccoon King had withdrawn from the battle circle, so he didn't pay attention to it. He focused on dealing with the White Tiger King and the Scorpion King. His sharp blade attack was close to the White Tiger King, but it passed through its body without touching anything. It seemed that the White Tiger King was just a phantom, but the fierce attack and killing intent was by no means illusory. It was the first time that Dean had encountered such a strange ability. It could be said that it was the first time that he had fought against a king on the second floor of the base. Whether it was the Raccoon King's strange poison or the White Tiger King's strange illusory ability, he had never heard of it before. It was extremely rare, even among the 5-star legendary monsters. Moreover, it had become unique after the king's in-depth study and improvement. The White Tiger King jumped in front of Dean. It seemed that it had passed through the sharp blade, but it was menacing. The White Tiger King's sharp claws slapped on Dean's shoulder. The shoulder had turned into an oval shell with 7 or 8 ferocious short thorns on its surface. The White Tiger King's claws pierced through the short thorns. Dean was surprised, but he felt a huge force coming from his shoulder. His whole body flew backward and hit the floor of the room. The ground was able to withstand his huge body, but there were no signs of cracking at all. Even when his sharp blade scratched the ground, it only left shallow cracks. Unless he stabbed with all his strength, it was impossible to make a deep hole. It was obvious how hard the metal in this room was. "What's going on?" Dean quickly stood up from the ground and looked at the White Tiger King. There was some shock in his eyes. He clearly saw the claws pass through the short thorns on his shoulder like a phantom, but how could it hit his shoulder? Moreover, the white tiger king's strength was extremely fierce. He felt that it could crush him in terms of brute force. Whether it was Splitter, Sun Beast, Turtle Shell, Poison Queen, or other magic marks, none of them were power-type magic marks. Sun Beast was a long-range energy-type soulworm, Splitter was an extreme attack type, an agile assassin type, and the rest were either defensive type, perceptive type, or poison type. The only thing lacking was a powerful power-type soulworm. He suddenly found that his strength was about half of that of the other kings. The White Tiger King's eyes flashed with a dignified look as he saw Dean quickly climb up. His attack was not a trivial matter, as it directly penetrated the surface of Dean's shoulder and hit his flesh. It could be said that it could ignore all defenses. Coupled with the violent power of the White Tiger King, few people could withstand his attack. Even the king who was good at defense would lose his advantage in front of the White Tiger King. Because his phantom ability was specialized in defense-type warriors. At this time, the Scorpion King saw that Dean was repelled and immediately seized the opportunity to attack. But as soon as it got close, it was blocked by Dean's flame blades. The White Tiger King frowned as he saw the layers of flame blades that Dean had set up again. His phantom ability could penetrate the flame blades, but it would cause damage to his body. This was the reason why he didn't attack when he saw Dean use this move to defend. He wanted to wait for the poison of the Raccoon King to take effect. Who would have thought that the Raccoon King was just an idiot? He wasn't able to poison the White Tiger King to death. This person is a bit strange. He's good at several abilities: flame energy, blade attack, stone skin defense, poison. I don't know what else he can do. We should finish him as soon as possible to avoid any accidents. The White Tiger King turned to the Scorpion King and said. The Scorpion King smiled bitterly. You can get close with the phantom ability, but I don't know how to deal with his rogue defense. I know. Give me your strength. I'll try to kill him in one blow. The White Tiger King said in a deep voice. The Scorpion King saw that the White Tiger was ready to attack. He said, "Well, go ahead." The White Tiger King felt that his body was a lot lighter. He took a deep breath and let out a tiger roar. He rushed towards Dean's flame blades. Whoosh! The moment he got close, his body directly penetrated the flame blades. Dean's pupils shrank as he saw the White Tiger King jump into the flame shield. Although he expected and worried, he didn't think that it would really happen. The opponent's ability was too strange. Fortunately, he was prepared. The remaining blades fiercely stabbed towards the White Tiger King. Whoosh! 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 The sharp blades penetrated the White Tiger King's body, but they didn't hit. Dean's face changed. He wanted to pull back, but it was too late. The White Tiger King's speed was more than twice as fast as before. In the blink of an eye, the White Tiger King was in front of him. The target of the attack was the head. No! Dean roared. A lot of sharp blades grew out of his head. They crazily rose and stabbed towards the tiger's claw. He retreated, but the White Tiger King was faster. Dean's body flew out. The blades that were waving suddenly stopped. They collided with each other and cut off each other. Dean's body fell to the ground and didn't move for a long time. The White Tiger King was relieved as he looked at the ground. He couldn't use his phantom ability too much. Moreover, his body was in unbearable pain as he passed through the flame blades. I'll eat him. The Scorpion King saw that Dean didn't move, so he quickly crawled over. He had just climbed to Dean's side, and his scorpion tail was bent, ready to give a last stab. Suddenly, he screamed, and his body bounced back like lightning. At the same time, some of the blades scattered on the ground were raised like willow branches and suddenly stabbed. However, the Scorpion King dodged in advance and was not hit. Even so, he was scared and broke out in cold sweat. He had experienced the sharpness of the blades. If he didn't react quickly, he would have been cut into pieces. Although he wouldn't die, he would be seriously injured. Not dead, the White Tiger King was a bit shocked as he saw the scene. Dean slowly stood up, feeling the concussion in his brain. He couldn't help but have a lingering fear. If he hadn't turned his brain into stone and transferred part of the memory to his neck, he would have been dead by now. However, after this blow, he knew the opponent's ability. Chapter 1173. Do you think you are very powerful because I didn't kill you? White Tiger King sneered at Dean's provocation, but his heart slowly sank. He knew that Dean had guessed the characteristics of his ability. Moreover, Dean had mastered energy ability. If he used energy ability as a defense, then the next attack would be very difficult. The corner of Dean's mouth curved into a smile. His whole body suddenly burned with raging flames. He was like dry firewood under a bonfire curled up in the flames. The strong fire covered his body thickly. White Tiger King's face sank as he saw this. He took a deep breath and said to the Scorpion King, "He has seen through my ability. I will leave the rest to you." The Scorpion King nodded. He had some understanding of White Tiger King's ability. He knew that White Tiger King wasn't deliberately hiding his strength. Generally speaking, a king could defeat another king, but it was very difficult to kill one. Moreover, the Scorpion King felt that White Tiger King was a bit strange. He had a variety of different abilities. If White Tiger King focused on defense, then they would be helpless for a while. Dean looked at the Scorpion King next to him. The strange force field around the Scorpion King's body made him vigilant. He secretly turned his skin and bones into stone. Then he tried to decompose the genes on a sharp blade, just like White Tiger King's illusion ability. Dean didn't see any clues when White Tiger King attacked several times. But when he finally understood the ability of the White Tiger King, he knew that it was difficult to see the special ability of the White Tiger King. He couldn't even see whether the White Tiger King used his ability or not. The gap was too short to capture. At the moment of attack, the genes of the whole body are separated like water. Dean's eyes flashed. This time he couldn't use his X-ray vision to observe the genes. He could only try to understand the composition of the opponent's ability. When science entered the quantum field, it had been proved that whether it was human or other creatures, they weren't actually a whole. It was like a person made of sand. It seemed to be a whole body, but it was composed of countless sand grains. There were naturally gaps in it. But humans didn't turn into sand because of the biological magnetic field in their bodies. Dean was glad that he was a modern person, so he was able to quickly think of the particularity and structure of the White Tiger's ability. Other kings who didn't have enough scientific knowledge wouldn't be able to figure it out. They would only define it as magical. Most of the kings liked to fight and politics. Only a few of them would study scientific knowledge. Control the magnetic field in the body to control the separation of the body for a short time. At the moment of being attacked, his body will become like countless loose particles, becoming like an illusory shadow, dodging the attack. However, energy attacks won't work. Flames can burn everything big and small. Even water can be burned dry, and no matter how sharp a knife is, it can't cut through water. That's why he's immune to my sharp blade attack, but he'll be burned by the flames. Dean's eyes flashed. Although he knew the White Tiger King's ability, but the key to this step was to control the biological magnetic field. Suddenly, he thought of another thing. What would happen if he shrank the density of his body infinitely? There's a lot of space in the cells of a living being. What would happen if these spaces were shrunk? Would the body become smaller? This was for sure. But in addition to the body becoming smaller, what difference would there be? Thinking of this, Dean was eager to try. For a king, the ability was a kind of potential development of the body. The ability was ever-changing, but it all originated from the body. Developing the body was equal to developing the ability. Dean did it. While protecting himself with the flame, he controlled the sharp blades to set up a round shield. Then he controlled several sharp blades to feel the tiny units in the sharp blades. Then he felt the force field between these tiny units. It didn't take too much time. Just like raising his hand, he quickly felt the force field between the tiny units in the sharp blade. However, when he wanted to control this force field, he found it extremely difficult. First of all, controlling these tiny units made him feel like he couldn't exert any strength. It was like an ordinary person controlling their ears. He felt like his strength couldn't be transmitted to them at all. The sharp blades don't have my nerves. It's too difficult to control them. Let's try my arm. Dean gave up continuing to control the sharp blades. Instead, he felt the tiny units and the force field on his arm. This time, the speed was faster. He immediately felt the countless tiny cells on his arm moving slowly. He tried to control some of these cells and soon control their actions. Dean's eyes lit up. He slowly tried to control the force field on his arm. After 2 minutes, he slowly controlled the force field to separate a gap in the middle of his arm. He used a sharp blade on his back to cut down and aimed at the gap in the force field on his arm. He saw that the sharp blade went into the gap, but there was no feeling of touching an object. There was also no blood. Success! Dean was a little surprised. He pulled out the sharp blade and saw that there was no change in his arm. There seemed to be no crack, but only he could feel that a part of the force field in the middle was separated. Sure enough, his ability is like this. Dean was a little excited. He tried to control all parts of his body. After 4 or 5 minutes, he could separate the force field on his feet, chest, neck, and other parts, including his head. But after the force field of the brain was separated, his thoughts would fall into a moment of confusion, as if his reaction was suddenly slow. After repeated attempts, Dean's excitement gradually faded. Although he mastered the ability of the White Tiger King in less than 10 minutes, he found that it was very difficult to use it as skillfully as the White Tiger King. He needed a lot of time to practice. His current fastest speed was more than 30 seconds to separate a part of the force field. But the White Tiger King was able to separate the force field in less than 0.01 seconds, and the whole body was separated at the same time. He can penetrate into my body while separating the force field. There must be a way. Dean fell into thought. The ability of the White Tiger King was not as easy to copy as that of the Raccoon King. It needed to be studied and a lot of time to practice. He thought for a moment without any results, so he temporarily stopped thinking about it. Instead, he thought about the previous idea of compressing the space in his body. He immediately tried to shrink the space between the cells so that the cell membrane tightly wrapped around the nucleus. The White Tiger King's figure passed through the sharp blades, but the cold air that emerged from the blades enveloped the White Tiger King's body. In the next moment, more sharp blades followed. The White Tiger King's pupils constricted, and its face was full of shock. It hurriedly tried to separate its body to escape, but it discovered that the cells in its body had been frozen by the cold air, and its movements had become sluggish. The speed at which it could control its body had clearly become slower. No! The White Tiger King raised its sharp claws, and a metallic luster appeared all over its body. Its fur tensed up as it resisted the bombardment of the sharp blades. Puff, puff, puff. The sharp blades pierced into the White Tiger King's body. The sound of flesh being pierced and bones being cut was heard. However, the White Tiger King's body was like a fallen leaf as it fell to the ground. A lot of blood sputtered out of its body. Its head had been pierced 7 or 8 times by the sharp blades. If it wasn't for its tenacious vitality, it would have been dead by now. Damn! Seeing this scene, the Scorpion King and Snake King's expressions changed, and they were both shocked and furious. They quickly rushed up and blocked the incoming blades and dragged the White Tiger King back. Even so, the Scorpion King's body was pierced by 4 or 5 sharp blades. The Snake King's tail was cut in 2. The cut surface was neat, but the pain of the cut made it grit its teeth. What is this thing? How can it be so sharp? The Snake King dragged the White Tiger King, who was bleeding all over his body. He was surprised and angry as he looked at the distant Dean. Although the White Tiger King's attack was very sharp, he didn't think that his strengthened scales would be unable to resist it. It must be known that the Snake King's scales could resist missiles and even bounce off laser weapons and bullets. The surface of the scales was unusually smooth. Ordinary blades and claws would slide off when they hit it. The Snake King had played the snake's scales to the extreme. He didn't expect that it would be cut off by Dean's sharp blade. It was simply terrifying. In fact, even Dean himself didn't realize that he had played the splitter's blade to the extreme. The sharpness of the blade had been strengthened to the extreme. It was beyond the level of a 3-star legendary monster. "Quick, let go of him!" The Scorpion King screamed. The Snake King looked down and was aghast. He quickly let go of the White Tiger King. He saw that the wounds on the White Tiger King's body hadn't healed. The blood that was flowing out of his body had turned from bright red to black. It exuded an extremely unpleasant stench. The White Tiger King's snow-white fur had been dyed black. In just a few breaths, the black had spread to his whole body. "Is the blade poisonous?" The Snake King screamed and quickly swam away from the White Tiger King. He suddenly remembered that he had been stabbed by the blade. His face turned ugly. His arm suddenly turned into a scimitar and fiercely chopped at the place where the White Tiger King's tail was cut off. Blood gushed out of the cut, but soon his muscles tightened to stop the bleeding. He saw that the red flesh inside the cut-off part of the tail had black spots that quickly expanded. If he had been a little bit slower, then he would have cut off more of the snake's body. He broke out in a cold sweat. If it wasn't for his habit of separating the flesh and blood around the wound from his body, the poison would have flowed through his body along with his blood. Thinking of this, he looked at the Scorpion King next to him. He saw that the Scorpion King had already removed its shell. He couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. At the same time, he sullenly said, "He has such a terrifying poison. Why didn't you say so earlier?" I also didn't expect that he could suddenly injure the Mirage King. The Scorpion King smiled bitterly. At this time, the forehead of the White Tiger King on the ground cracked open, and an insect covered in flames crawled out. Some of the flames were black, and as soon as the insect crawled out, it bounced to the side. Suddenly, its body shook violently, and in the next moment, one end of the flame insect broke open, and an even smaller flame insect crawled out. It quickly crawled to the side, raised its head like a poisonous snake, and a shrill voice came from the flames. "My demon body is useless. I can't help you here. I'll retreat first." The Scorpion King and the Snake King looked at him with complicated eyes. A trace of greed flashed in the depths of their eyes, but they were restrained. The Scorpion King whispered, "You go. Be careful." You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.